Hey there, everyone. Welcome to my tale, The Day the Sun Disappeared, a chilling descent into eternal darkness. Join me on this eerie journey into a world where darkness reigns and strange creatures lurk. As we explore what happens when the sun no longer rises, here, we explore the scariest stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. To keep this channel growing, I'm begging you to subscribe and like this video. Your support truly motivates me. And don't forget to comment about where you're listening from. I'm curious to know your haunted locations. Trust me, I'm eager to hear where you're tuning in from. So drop a comment below and subscribe. And before we dive in, I have something special just for you. A weight loss dietary supplement that helps you shed pounds while you sleep. Seriously, it's like magic. If you want to know more, click the link in the description. Now, let's get started on our scary adventure. It all began on a day that should have been normal. I woke up like any other morning, excited to see the bright sun shining through my window. But when I peeked outside, my heart sank. The world was wrapped in darkness. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Maybe it was just a thick fog. I knew something was wrong. I heard whispers in the air, strange sounds that sent shivers down my spine. People were panicking. The streets were filled with frightened faces as more and more people realized the truth. The sun was gone. No light, no warmth, just the dark sky pressing down on us. I felt a chill crawling up my back. What could make the sun disappear? No one had answers. As time passed, the strange sounds grew louder. Shadows flitted through the streets. Creatures I had never seen before began to emerge. They moved silently, twisting shapes that vanished when I looked directly at them. Fear gripped my heart as I realized we were not alone in this darkness. The first night I saw them for the first time, I was huddled inside my house, barricaded against whatever was out there. The whispers turned into faint growls. With my heart pounding, I peered out the window. I saw the creatures with my own eyes, twisted forms with glimmering eyes, gliding through the shadows like water. I quickly stepped back, terrified. What were they? Creatures of the darkness? Thoughts raced through my mind. I needed to find others. I couldn't be alone in this mess. I took a deep breath and stepped outside into the overwhelming darkness. The world was different now. Every sound felt louder. Every rustle seemed dangerous. I called out for anyone. Hello? Is anyone there? My voice echoed back, swallowed by the thick darkness. Panic prickled at my skin. Suddenly, I saw movement. A figure emerged slowly, unsure of itself. It was my friend Jenny. She looked terrified, her eyes wide. You too? She whispered. We held each other tightly, sharing the fear that had taken hold. Together, we decided to find other survivors. We walked cautiously, sticking close to the walls. Everywhere, shadows danced in the corners of my vision. It felt as if something was watching us. The closer we went to the center of town, the darker it seemed. Buildings appeared transformed, no longer familiar. Then we heard screams, a loud, piercing cry that sent us running. We dashed around a corner, right into a crowd of people. They were scared, confused, and desperate. The shout had come from them. Everyone was telling their stories, of strange glimpses of creatures, of people disappearing, of whispers that filled the night. The darkness was more than shadows. It was alive, almost like it was hungry. I shook as I listened to others share their horrors. What kind of world were we living in now? We had to find answers. As we gathered, whispers turned into plans. The bravest among us suggested we go to the old library. They said it held secrets of the past, maybe even how to make the sun return. The thought excited me, yet scared me all at once. What if we found something worse? But we couldn't just wait. With a mix of fear and hope, we set off into the deeper darkness together, stepping into unknown terrors that awaited us. As we moved through the pitch-black streets towards the old library, I felt a cold breeze sweep past us. It sent a shiver right through my spine. The shadows seemed to creep closer, as if the darkness wanted to pull us into its depths. Every sound echoed around us, a distant thud, a whisper, and even the silence felt heavy, like something was lying in wait. Jenny's hand gripped mine tightly. I could see her eyes darting around, scanning for movement. We weren't just walking through a dark town. We were walking into a nightmare that felt alive. I could hardly breathe, my heart pounding in my chest. What if we ran into those creatures? What if the stories we heard were real? Suddenly, out of nowhere, a loud crash broke the stillness. It came from an alley to our left. We froze, our breaths caught in our throats. The sound echoed like something big had fallen, or worse, something had been thrown. I glanced at Jenny, and I could see the fear mirrored in her eyes. "We should go check," I whispered, my voice shaking. She nodded, but we lingered for a moment, hesitant. The alley was dark and narrow, with shadows pressing against the walls like they wanted to swallow us. Slowly, we made our way toward the sound. With each step, I felt a knot growing in my stomach. I could hear my heartbeat, loud and fast, like it wanted to escape. Peeking into the alley, my breath hitched. There, at the end, lay a broken sign swinging in the wind. It read, "Welcome to the Darkwood Library." The shadows danced wildly around it, as if the darkness was sending a warning. It didn't look inviting at all, not that it ever had, but now it felt ominous, almost like it was hiding secrets. In a moment of courage, I stepped forward. The air turned electric, buzzing with tension. I took a deep breath before pushing the door open. The hinges creaked loudly, echoing in the silence. Inside, the library was darker than I imagined. Old books lined the walls, their pages yellowed and dusty. Cobwebs draped down like curtains, hanging thick in the air. I squinted, trying to make out the shadows. It felt like we had entered a time capsule, frozen in fear. I walked further inside, the wooden floorboards creaking under my weight. Each step felt like I was crossing into a realm that was not meant for us. As my eyes adjusted, I could see the shelves were filled with forgotten stories, but the atmosphere felt heavy, as if the words trapped inside were holding their breath, waiting for the right moment to escape. Then I saw it, a flicker at the corner of my eye. I turned, heart racing, and found a dark figure looming at the end of the aisle. It didn't move, just stood there, shrouded in darkness. I gasped and grabbed Jenny's arm. "Did you see that?" I whispered. She nodded, her face pale. My gut twisted with dread. Was it one of those creatures? We stood frozen for a moment, locked in fear. The figure flickered again and then vanished, swallowed by the darkness. I felt an icy grip on my heart. "We should leave," I said, urgency creeping into my voice. But before I could turn away, the creature reappeared, closer this time, its form more defined in the muted light. Its eyes shone, like cold stars staring right through me. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just watching us, it was studying us. I realized I could see its features more clearly now, long limbs that seemed to stretch and twist in unnatural ways. It had a face that looked like a smile carved into the darkness itself. A lingering expression that felt wrong. I wanted to scream, but my voice was trapped somewhere deep inside me. Then, the creature moved. It glided toward us with a fluidity that didn't seem possible. My instincts kicked in, and I pulled Jenny back, stumbling in our panic as we tried to retreat. But the darkness around us didn't let us escape easily. Books started to topple from the shelves, crashing to the ground in a chaotic whirlwind. "Run!" I shouted. We sprinted through the narrow aisles, dodging the raining books. I could hear them thud against the floor, but I didn't look back. The creature followed, inching closer with every frantic step. I felt as if the shadows were reaching out, trying to wrap around our legs, pulling us back into the darkness. Finally, we reached the door, and I threw it open with all my strength. Sunlight pierced through the cracks and illuminated the dusty room. I pulled Jenny through, slamming the door behind us, panting heavily. We leaned against the wall, gasping for breath, adrenaline coursing through our veins. The library loomed behind us, dark and foreboding. "We have to tell everyone what we saw," I gasped, still reeling from the shock. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. Would they believe us? Would anyone understand the danger lurking in the shadows? "Do you think it will come after us again?" Jenny asked, her voice trembling as she glanced over her shoulder. I didn't want to think about it. The thought of that thing slipping into the world with us sent a cold shiver down my spine. Just then, a low growl echoed in the distance, chilling the air around us. My heart sank. It was far from over. Fear washed over us anew as we stepped away from the library, retreating into the unknown streets. The shadows were everywhere, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We had entered a battle against an unseen enemy, one that wouldn't stop until it got what it wanted. As we stumbled away from the old library, the growl echoed in my ears, wrapping around us like a cold fog. I glanced back, my heart racing faster with every step. The library stood still, its dark windows like eyes watching us. Was that creature still inside, or was it lying in wait, planning its next move in the shadows? We hurried down the street, trying to reach the safety of the crowd. But all around us, the world felt different now. The air was thick with an unsettling tension. Whispering winds twisted through empty streets, carrying voices I couldn't quite understand. It was as if the darkness itself was speaking, warning us of dangers lurking ahead. My thoughts raced. Were others feeling the same fear? Had they seen the strange creature? I needed to find more survivors to share what we witnessed. But each passerby looked just as frightened as us, eyes wide, searching the shadows as if each corner could hide a nightmare. Jenny and I pressed on, our feet moving faster, desperation pushing us forward. Suddenly, we reached the town square, a once lively place, but now shrouded in dark emptiness. Moonlight barely broke through the thick clouds above, casting eerie shadows. I hoped we would find comfort in numbers, but what I saw was unsettling. People gathered in small clusters, murmuring with urgent whispers. They seemed to share stories of their own encounters. A chill ran down my back when I overheard several voices mentioning missing friends, loved ones that had vanished without a trace. Just gone, one woman said, her voice shaking. One moment they were there, and the next nothing. The fear was infectious, creeping into my thoughts. What if the shadows were everywhere, especially where we felt safe? I wanted to believe it was just the panic talking, but deep down I knew it was likely the truth. I felt a sense of dread settle over me as I glanced at each face, searching for anything that felt familiar, anything that offered hope. Then we heard a scream, piercing through the air like a knife, snapping me out of my thoughts. It came from the edge of the square, heading toward the dark alleyways. The crowd jumped, gasps murmuring among us. Without thinking, I bolted toward the sound, pulling Jenny along. We had to know what was happening. As we neared the alley, I felt my heart thumping wildly, fear and curiosity blending into a strange mix. We turned the corner and found a small group of people surrounding something on the ground. A man lay there, eyes wide open, shock painted across his face. I wanted to rush forward, but something held me back, a chill creeping in that felt like the tendrils of fear wrapping around my mind. "Look," someone shouted, pointing down. I forced myself to peer closer, and my stomach dropped. There, etched into the ground beside him, was a pattern of dark, swirling shapes. It looked like a strange symbol, written in something that resembled soot or ash. What was it doing there? The man stirred, his eyes darting around, unfocused. He tried to pull himself up, but he looked pale and weak. "They're coming," he gasped, his voice barely audible. "They're here in the dark." The crowd murmured in confusion and fear. I could feel the tension mounting. I wanted to help him, but felt rooted to the spot, scared of what might happen next. Then, just like that, the darkness seemed to shift as if it was alive. It flowed around us, encasing the light in an almost tangible grasp. The man's breathing quickened. "You have to get out of here. You don't understand." But before he could finish, something caught my eye. Emerging from the shadows, strange shapes slipped silently between the crowd, ghostly figures that sent shivers down my spine. I blinked, unsure if my mind was playing tricks. Were they real? The crowd panicked, screaming as more dark shapes came into view. They twisted and contorted, almost humanoid, yet wrong in every way. I felt paralyzed, fear flooding my veins like ice as one of the creatures stepped forward, its long fingers reaching out into the light. Without thinking, I pulled Jenny away, yelling for everyone to run. "Get out! Move!" My voice broke through the chaos, but I didn't know if I sounded brave or just scared. We turned and dashed back toward the town, hearts pounding in unison, praying the creatures wouldn't follow. As we sprinted away from the square, the growls grew louder behind us. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, darting between buildings, as if the darkness itself was alive. I heard cries and desperate shouts from behind, but there was no time to look back. We had to escape the clutches of whatever terrifying fate awaited us. Just as we reached the corner of the street, a loud crash echoed from behind. I stumbled and glanced back, catching sight of one of those faces. Its wide eyes glinted under the dim light, locking onto mine. I could feel the fear choke me, and I urged Jenny to keep going, pushing myself forward as panic gripped my heart. We dashed toward the nearest shelter, praying for safety. My mind raced with thoughts of the library and what lay behind its doors. I couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was not just here. It was spreading, calling out for more victims, and we were running right into the heart of it, unknowing. As Jenny and I sprinted toward the nearest building, my heart raced like a wild drumbeat. I could hear the chaotic sounds behind us, the growls, the desperate screams, and the unsettling quiet interspersed between. It felt like time had warped, stretching on endlessly, making each second tick painfully slow. Just ahead, the silhouette of an old diner loomed, its neon sign flickering erratically, casting eerie shadows that danced across the cracked pavement. "Inside! Hurry!" I shouted, pushing the door open just as we reached the entrance. The bell above tinkled, an unsettling sound amidst the chaos outside. We burst in, slamming the door behind us, and leaned against it, breathless and panicked. Inside, the diner was dark and stale, the air heavy with the smell of burnt coffee and forgotten meals. Distant murmurs echoed, and my eyes darted around the dim room, scanning for familiar faces. A small group of people sat huddled in a booth at the far end, their eyes wide with fear. They looked just as lost as we felt, filled with despair. One woman clutched her phone, her knuckles white. I could see the screen glowing, but it seemed to show nothing but static. "The signals are down," she whispered, panic lacing her voice. "I can't reach anyone. It's all gone dark." I turned to Jenny, my mind racing with thoughts. The people in the diner had probably seen the same things we did, but my gut twisted as I wondered if they were safe. It almost felt like we had walked into a trap, one that the darkness had set for us. I wanted to speak, to explain what we had experienced, but words escaped me. The air felt thick, and we were all trapped in this unsettling moment of confusion. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed from outside. The door rattled as if something was pressing against it, trying to force its way in. Everyone tensed. I glanced around seriously, taking in the fear written on their faces. "What was that?" someone whispered. The panic rose, filling the small diner. The door rattled again, harder this time. Whatever was out there wanted in. I looked at Jenny, and I could tell she was scared, just as frightened as I was. We all were. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and went out. Darkness enveloped us, swallowing the room whole like a predator ready to strike. I heard gasps and whispers as people fumbled for their phones, frantic to find some source of light. I pulled out mine, and the small beam pierced the suffocating dark around us. I shined it toward the door, just in time to see a shadow pass by the window, a fleeting glimpse of a figure that made my skin crawl. The faint glow highlighted the shapes of shadows moving outside, twisting against the glass, like dark fingers reaching to pull us out. I could barely breathe, the tension tightening around me like a noose. "We have to stay quiet," one man said, his voice low and trembling. "If they can see us, we're done." I could hear the fear in his words, as if he had faced the darkness before and barely escaped. Glancing around, I saw everyone staring wide-eyed at the door. Moments stretched on forever in that suffocating silence, punctuated only by the sound of distant growling and scratching. I felt my heart in my throat, racing faster than ever. Each sound made my skin crawl, as if something was crawling just beneath the surface of reality, ready to burst forth. Somehow, the darkness outside felt alive, as if it sensed our fear and was feeding off it. Suddenly, the cool air rushed in as the door swung open with a screech, revealing a figure silhouetted against the dim light outside. Everyone gasped. Instinctively, I stepped back, raising my phone's light to illuminate whoever, or whatever, had entered. But what stepped inside wasn't human. It was another one of those creatures, their form shifting and writhing in ways that defied nature. It stood in the threshold, eyes glinting disturbingly in the dim light, as if considering its next meal. We froze, hearts pounding, as the darkness seemed to swell and pulse around it, almost entrancing in its malevolence. The creature emitted a low growl as it stepped further into the diner. I felt every fiber of my being scream to run, yet my feet felt glued to the ground. Jaws clenched. I glanced at Jenny, who looked just as terrified. "What do we do?" she mouthed, and I could only shake my head in response, unable to form words. The creature advanced slowly, moving with a grace that felt otherworldly. It lifted its arm, fingers elongating unnaturally, reaching toward us with a predatory focus. My mind raced, searching for a plan. Should we attract the attention of the others or stay hidden? But every second felt like eternity. Then I remembered the exit. I turned to the back of the diner and whispered, "There's a door. We can make it." I hoped we wouldn't get cornered, but desperation pushed us forward. I grabbed Jenny's hand, ready to act. Just as we turned to flee, the creature lunged forward, snatching the nearest person by the collar. A chilling scream filled the air, ringing in my ears as I pulled Jenny along. We darted toward the exit, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The diner erupted into chaos, people scrambling, trying to escape the grip of the creatures that seemed to be surrounding us. I pushed Jenny ahead. "Run! Don't look back!" I yelled, bursting through the door and outside into the uncertain night once more. But the darkness had multiplied. A swarm of those creatures lurked just outside, their glowing eyes reflecting the faint light of the moon. I was terrified, trapped between two nightmares, the power of fear and the unknown darkness. As my heart raced, panic threatened to envelop me again. The shadows around us began to pulse with life, swirling like black smoke. I had to find a way out, not just for me, but for everyone I cared about. We needed a plan to face whatever threats lay in the darkness ahead. With urgency gripping my heart, I turned to Jenny, my voice firm despite the fear. "We have to find the others. We can't be alone in this fight. Where do we go?" Jenny whispered, her voice trembling as we stumbled out of the diner. The streets felt alive with shadows, each corner hiding secrets that made my skin crawl. I could still hear the chaos behind us. Screams and growls echoed in the night, distant but terrifying. Every second felt crucial. We had to move, but where? I scanned the area, searching for any sign of safety amid the encroaching darkness. My heart raced, pounding like a drum as I caught sight of a narrow alley just a few steps ahead. "There!" I pointed, adrenaline surging through me. "We can hide there and figure out what to do next." We darted into the alley, the cold air wrapping around us like a shroud. The walls closed in, forcing us into a claustrophobic space where the only light came from a flickering street lamp at the entrance. The shadows danced wildly, stretching down the alley like fingers reaching for us, and dread nudged at my mind. I pressed myself against the brick wall, hoping it would somehow shield us from whatever horrors lurked outside. "Do you think they saw us?" Jenny asked, her voice a mere whisper, filled with fear. I couldn't answer immediately. I didn't even know if they referred to the creatures or the other frantic townspeople. "I don't know," I finally said, glancing back toward the mouth of the alley. "But we need to be quiet." I strained to listen, my breath hitching in my throat. The air was heavy with tension, punctuated only by the occasional crash or shriek from the street. Then something caught my attention, a muted scraping sound against the pavement. My heart sank as I turned slowly toward the noise, the dread pooling in my stomach. I aimed my phone's light down the alley, illuminating the ground ahead. In the dim glow, I saw it, a shadow slithering along the edge of the wall, moving closer with an eerie purpose. The lump in my throat grew as I saw the familiar dark shape of one of those creatures, gliding toward us. Its long limbs undulated like snakes in the dark, and I could see its chilling grin, a gash of darkness that seemed to mock our attempts to hide. "Jenny," I hissed urgently, grabbing her arm and pulling her deeper into the alley. But in this narrow space, there was nowhere to escape. The fear settled like a heavy weight on my chest as I struggled to keep my breath steady. The creature moved with an unnatural grace, undeterred by our futile attempts to remain hidden. I could see it now, its eyes glinting and reflecting the weak light, locking onto us with an intensity that made my heart pound harder. A primal instinct kicked in, pushing me to take action. I turned to Jenny, my voice low but urgent. "We have to keep moving. There's got to be a way out." We started to back away slowly, making sure not to make any sudden moves. With every inch we retreated, the creature stepped forward, its gaze unwavering, as if it relished our fear. I could hear shallow breaths, mine mingling with the uncertainty swirling around us. Suddenly, the creature let out a low, chilling sound that resonated through the alley. It was a distorted mix of a growl and a laugh, and I felt my skin crawl. Without thinking, I spun around and bolted down the alley, Jenny hot on my heels. We sprinted past darkened doorways, shadows creeping along the walls, as if they wanted to swallow us whole. I could feel the pull of the darkness behind us, and the sounds of movement only intensified my panic. My mind spun with possibilities of where to go, desperate for safety. Then, off to the side, I saw a staircase leading down into what appeared to be a basement entrance, the door slightly ajar. It wasn't an ideal hiding place, but desperation pushed me forward. "This way," I called to Jenny, and we darted down the stairs, barely glancing back as we slipped through the narrow door. Inside, the basement was dark and musty, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. I pulled my phone from my pocket, its light illuminating the cramped space littered with old furniture and cobwebs. Boxes piled high looked like they hadn't been touched in years. The sight felt strangely familiar, like stepping into a forgotten memory of better times. But as soon as the door closed behind us, I felt a chilling silence wrap around us, pressing in from all sides. "What now?" Jenny asked, her eyes wide. "Let's just wait a moment," I whispered, trying to steady my breath. "We need to be quiet and listen." I strained my ears against the hush, listening for any sign of danger. The muffled sounds of chaos above faded, replaced by a thick, oppressive silence that felt almost unnatural. Seconds passed like hours, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart, echoing in the stillness. And then, something shifted in the darkness. I turned toward the sound, my heart racing again as I saw a figure emerge from the shadows at the far end of the basement. My breath caught as I aimed my light toward it, frozen by the sight. It was another creature, crouched low, its long limbs folding into itself like a grotesque puzzle. Its eyes bore into us, reflecting the meager light like two endless voids. I could feel the fear choking me once more, and I leaned back instinctively. Panic surged, and I grabbed Jenny's hand tightly, ready to flee again, but we were trapped. "Chill," I said, barely managing to whisper. "Don't move." The creature tilted its head, almost curiously, like it was studying us. I could see the jagged teeth glistening in the dim light. It made a sound, low and unsettling, that reverberated in my chest. I had read about creatures like this in myths, stories that warn of beings with a hunger that went beyond a simple meal. It was a hunger for fear, despair, something that rooted deep in the soul. We held our breath as it crept closer, its movements fluid and eerily quiet. It stopped just a breath away, and I could feel the tension building in the air as I waited for it to strike. Just when I thought we were done for, the creature paused, tilting its head in a peculiar way as if it heard something I couldn't. A sudden crash echoed from the stairs above us, and the creature snapped its attention back toward the noise, eyes widening. At that moment, I knew we had to act fast. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I pulled Jenny back toward the darkness at the far end of the basement, hoping to find some small crevice to hide. My mind raced with overwhelming thoughts. Would we ever make it out? And as we fumbled through the shadows, my fears shifted into something more desperate: survival. As I pulled Jenny deeper into the shadows, I felt the cold seep into my bones. I had no idea how large the basement was or what hidden corners lay in the dark, but I wanted to find a place where we could simply disappear. My heart raced, and every scraping sound felt amplified in the thick silence. "Where do we go now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I could hear her breath hitch with each sound we heard above, the world seeming to crumble around us as chaos unfolded. I scanned the room, looking for anything that might offer shelter. Some old furniture, maybe a pile of discarded boxes. In the dim light of my phone, I spotted a stack of worn crates in the corner, their edges splintered from time. "Over here," I urged, pulling her with me. We crouched behind the stack, the dust swirling around us as we settled into the stale air. I could feel the vibrations of the world above, thuds, panicked footsteps, and hushed voices whispering tales of horror that echoed all around. Just as I thought we might breathe a sigh of relief, the creature shifted in the darkness and began moving again, its attention drawn back to us. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't discover our hiding place. The way it moved felt disjointed, like it had too many joints and not enough sense of purpose. From our small window behind the crates, I caught glimpses of its elongated fingers dragging lightly along the floor, searching. My heart raced. Each scrape made me flinch, as if the darkness itself was closing in. Out of nowhere, a sudden crash echoed from above, and the ground trembled beneath us. I instinctively grabbed Jenny's hand tighter, her eyes wide with fear. The creature froze, its head snapping toward the noise, and I felt the very air shift with its attention. "Is it coming?" she murmured, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied quietly, feeling a knot form in my stomach. The waiting was unbearable, a tension that coiled tighter with each passing heartbeat. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the creature turned its back to us, moving toward the source of the sound. It slithered away, leaving me in a state of anxious relief, but knowing we couldn't stay here much longer. As the sounds from above began to fade, I pulled myself up slowly, making sure to keep my voice low. "We need to move. We can't wait for it to come back." Jenny nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. We carefully edged around the pile of crates, but as soon as we stepped out, I felt a chill run down my spine, an unmistakable sense of being watched. I quickly glanced around the basement, the darkness stretching surreal shapes that seemed to shift as I studied them. I wanted to move, to get out of this place, but strange noises caught my attention. Faint whispers floated through the air, soft and sinister. It sounded like 100 voices speaking in unison, layered over one another, confounding and chilling. "What is that?" I whispered, my heart racing. "I don't know," Jenny replied, her voice trembling. She looked like she was trying to convince herself that the shadows were just figments of our imagination. Then, suddenly, the whispers grew louder, harsher, like a storm brewing just beyond the doorway. I could feel my pulse quicken as I turned toward the entrance, dread settling in my stomach. "Maybe we should go back to the exit," she suggested, her gaze darting in every direction, as if she expected the shadows to come alive at any moment. "We can take our chances outside." "No, I think we should explore more down here." My voice was firmer than I felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening above wasn't over yet. If we went back into that chaos, we might not survive. We crept forward, our silent footsteps echoing eerily in the empty space, and soon stumbled upon an archway leading to another dark area of the basement. I took a deep breath, nudging Jenny gently. "Let's check it out." With trepidation, we stepped through the archway. This section was even darker, and the air felt heavy with an oppressive weight. I switched on my phone's flashlight, illuminating a long corridor lined with old bottles and crates piled high. Each step we took felt like a step into the unknown. Then, out of the corner of my eye, something caught my attention, a glimmer of light from further down the corridor. Curiosity pushed me closer, but a sense of foreboding nagged at my mind. The whispers grew louder, twisting through the air like a malicious wind. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing ahead. Jenny nodded slowly, her face pale as she gripped my arm. "What is it?" The tension in her voice made my heart race. "I don't know, but we need to find out." I was drawn to it, that flicker of light promising some answer to the chaos above. I moved forward, and Jenny hesitated but followed closely behind. As we approached, the light pulsated, revealing what appeared to be an altar made of stone. Shrouded in dust and cobwebs, odd symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, as if alive with energy. The sight sent a chill through me, a primal fear I could hardly understand. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling like dry leaves caught in a storm. "I don't know," I replied, feeling a mix of dread and intrigue. The whispers intensified, swirling around us, words I couldn't decipher blending into an unsettling chorus. Suddenly, the light burst brighter, illuminating the entire corridor around us, and I felt the temperature drop sharply. My breath came out in visible clouds. I turned to Jenny, who stood frozen in place, her eyes wide as saucers. Before I could grasp what was happening, the altar began to tremble, the symbols pulsating with a rhythm that matched the whispers. It felt like they were calling out to us, beckoning us closer, and I was terrified of what might happen next. With shaky hands, I reached for Jenny. "We have to go. Now!" But before we could react, the ground shook violently beneath us. The light intensified to blinding levels, and a piercing shriek erupted through the whispers, leaving my ears ringing. The altar cracked open, revealing a void of darkness that seemed to pull at everything around it. I felt a surge of panic, urging us to flee, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. "Run!" I shouted, and finally, that snapped her out of her trance. We turned to sprint back down the corridor, but the darkness roared, and I could feel its pull tugging at us, threatening to drag us into its depths. With fear fueling my steps, I barreled toward the archway, Jenny right behind me. The shadows stretched, eager to swallow us whole. But just as we reached the entrance, I caught sight of the creature again, poised in the dim light, eyes fixed on us with hungry anticipation. This time, we had no option but to flee. As I dashed back toward the archway, an icy grip of fear settled deep within my chest. My instincts screamed to run, to escape the dark pull of that altar and the creature looming just beyond it. Jenny's breath came out in sharp gasps behind me, but we had to keep moving, had to find a way out before it was too late. The creature lunged forward, its long limbs stretching and contorting in unnatural angles. It let out a sound that echoed down the corridor, a mixture of a chilling roar and a laugh that felt like shards of ice scraping against my mind. Panic ignited my legs, propelling me faster as I stumbled through the archway, dragging Jenny along. "Keep going," I shouted, not daring to look back as I could feel the creature's presence closing in. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, but the darkness of the basement felt infinite, its corners filled with shadows that loomed larger with every breath I took. We burst into the previous space, the light from my phone cutting through the murky air, revealing scattered debris and old furniture. I could still hear the howls of chaos above, but the whispers had intensified, merging into frenzied cries that seemed to echo our fear. Just ahead, I spotted the door we had entered earlier, trapped between the worlds of light and shadow. The thought of stepping outside into uncertainty and chaos was terrifying, but staying here felt like an invitation to horror. "We have to make it to the door," I yelled, barely recognizing my own voice amid the din. We rushed forward, dodging a broken table that lay in our path. The space felt heavy, like the air itself wanted to pin us down. With trembling hands, I grasped the doorknob. It felt hot to the touch, almost alive, as I twisted it wildly, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The door creaked ominously, but opened. Every sound amplified in my ears as we stumbled into the night. The outside world was a stark contrast, the moonlight casting silver shadows across the pavement as we burst onto the street. But the peace was deceiving. The distant screams had transformed into a cacophony of terror, made more surreal by the quiet surrounding us now. I turned to look back, hoping to see nothing but darkness. Instead, I caught a fleeting glimpse of the creature framed in the open doorway behind us, its eyes glowing like lanterns amid the shadows. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as our gazes locked. "Run!" I cried, grabbing Jenny again. Together, we bolted down the street, desperate to put space between us and whatever horror that thing had unleashed. Each step felt like a race against time, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, pushing me forward. But as we ran, the whispers returned, swirling around me like a storm. They filled my mind, pouring doubt into my thoughts, urging me to turn back and confront the terror we had escaped. "Where do we go?" Jenny panted as we rounded a corner, her eyes wide and searching. I had no answers, only instinct propelling me forward. "There!" I pointed to an old church just ahead, its doors standing slightly ajar, casting a beacon of light against the oppressive darkness. We dashed toward it, hoping for some safety, but the moment we stepped inside, an overwhelming stillness washed over us. The interior was shadowy, the high ceilings lost to darkness, while the flickering candles created flickering dance shadows that made the ends of the pews seem like looming figures. I hesitated, aware that the sanctuary's interior felt eerily inviting, yet danger was close behind. Was this place a refuge, or just another trap? "We have to keep moving," Jenny urged, her voice shaking. I nodded, but something tugged at my mind, an awareness that something ancient lay within these walls. As we crept deeper into the church, I could feel a presence watching us, like unseen eyes observing our every move. The feeling wrapped around me, thick and suffocating. Led by instinct, I wandered toward the altar, its elaborate carvings twisted and shrouded in dust. There, beneath a tattered cloth, I saw an old book. The ornate letters on its cover glimmered faintly, drawing me in as if the tome itself was calling out for me to uncover its secrets. "Don't touch it," Jenny warned softly, but I felt a strange compulsion, a need to understand what we were facing. Reaching out, I pulled back the cloth, revealing the ancient pages, covered with strange symbols and writings that sent tingles of fear crawling up my spine. As I began to read those unfamiliar words, the whispers in my mind intensified, drowning out every rational thought. They seemed to intertwine with the letters, spelling out a desperate warning. Beware of darkness. It feeds on fear. Before I could fully comprehend the message, the church doors slammed shut with a booming crash. Jenny gasped beside me, and I whirled around, panic surging through my veins. The air thickened with tension as shadows flickered around us, and once again, I could hear that dreadful sound, the creature's laugh echoing in the distance, mocking our attempts to escape. "It's coming!" I shouted, urgency flooding my voice. It felt as if the walls were closing in, a claustrophobic pressure wrapping around me, and I knew we had only moments before it would arrive. "Keep the book," I said frantically to Jenny. "It might give us an answer." Just then, the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, and a shadow darted past the edge of my vision. I couldn't tell if it was the creature or something else lurking in the dark. The shadows seemed to breathe around us, dark tendrils creeping closer, eager to ensnare us. Fear surged, urging me to act. "We have to find another way out," I yelled, stepping away from the altar as I searched for an escape. The back of the church held an ancient door, made of heavy wood and badly warped, but it was our only option. I sprinted toward it, but the moment I reached for the handle, the whispers exploded into a cacophony of warnings, a surge of voices crying out, filling my mind with confusion. And still I turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing a dark and narrow staircase that spiraled down into the depths below. "Is that a way out?" Jenny asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Before I could answer, I heard it, the sound of scraping claws and that laugh again, echoing through the dim light of the church. It was already here. Without thinking, I grabbed Jenny's hand, and together we plunged into the abyss, down the stairs, not knowing what horrors awaited us beneath the church. As we descended the staircase, the air thickened around us, smothering. Each step felt like a small betrayal of my senses, as if the shadows below were waiting for us, eager to consume whatever light we had left. The dampness clung to my skin, and I could smell mildew mixed with something musty, almost like decaying leaves. With my heart pounding in my chest, I flicked my phone flashlight on, its beam barely piercing the darkness. The narrow stairway spiraled down, winding like a serpent, twisting into realms I wasn't sure I wanted to explore. "Do you think we can get out?" Jenny whispered, her voice shaky and filled with dread. I could sense her fear, mirroring my own. "I don't know," I admitted, fear creeping in every corner of my mind. "But we can't go back. We have to keep moving." The weight of the whispers followed us, echoing down the stairwell, rising like a tide, threatening to swallow us whole. Each word was distorted, layered over one another, forming a haunting chorus that seeped into my bones. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed above us as the church door banged against the frame. The creature had found its way inside. I felt a surge of dread wash over me. It was hunting us. We pressed on, descending deeper into the darkness. The stairs finally ended in a small chamber lit by faint, flickering lanterns. Shadows danced along the walls, creating grotesque shapes that seemed to morph and shift before my eyes. I took a cautious step into the room, scanning my surroundings. The space was filled with crates, discarded remnants of a forgotten time. Rotted books lined the walls, their pages yellowed as if secrets lay between their covers, begging to be uncovered but warning us to stay away. "What is this place?" Jenny asked, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with a mixture of fear and fascination. As I moved further into the room, I noticed a small table in the center, an arrangement of strange tools and odd objects scattered across its surface. Some of them looked like talismans, twisted and gnarly, as if crafted from things pulled straight from nightmares. Others resembled tools of torture, each one a reminder of the dark history that lingered in the air. Maybe there's something here that can help us, I suggested, my curiosity battling with my caution. I approached the table, fingers trembling as I reached for a dagger that sparkled under the lantern light, its blade ancient and inscribed with symbols that mirrored those from the book. "Careful," Jenny warned, stepping towards me, her eyes wide with concern. I know, I muttered, gripping the dagger tightly. Suddenly, the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a tempest. The words edged closer to clarity, urging me to listen. "Lost souls seek retribution. Power of the dark must be contained." Those voices, they're warning us, I realized, glancing at Jenny, whose expression mirrored my unease. There was a weight to their words, a sense of urgency that urged us to act. Just then, the chamber's temperature plummeted, a bone-chilling cold wrapping around us like icy fingers. The lanterns flickered ominously, the light wavering, as if the shadows craved to swallow us whole. Desperation gnawed at my insides, and I could feel it again, the creature's presence, this time closer, more palpable. "Hide," I hissed, grabbing Jenny's arm and pulling her behind a stack of crates. We crouched low, breathless, fear clawing at my throat. From our hiding spot, I watched as the cave-like chamber filled with an oppressive darkness. An ominous figure materialized before us, its form shifting like smoke, grotesque shapes twisting in and out of sight. The creature's laugh echoed through the space, sending chills racing up my spine. "Where are you?" it taunted, the voice slithering through the air like a serpent. It prowled the room, searching for us with an insatiable hunger. In that moment, I realized we had to confront it. It had fed on our fear long enough. With the dagger still clutched in my hand, I steeled myself. "We can't just hide forever," I whispered to Jenny, her wide eyes watching me with uncertainty. "We don't know what it can do," she replied, her voice shaking. I could see the desperation mirrored in her fear. "We'll never know unless we fight it," I insisted, my heart pounding. I could feel the dagger's weight like a promise of power, or a curse. As the creature continued to search, I made my decision. "When I say go, we need to distract it. I'll create a diversion while you find a way out," I said, determination stealing over my fear. Jenny nodded, but I could see the doubt swirling in her eyes. What if it doesn't work? "We have to try," I replied, clutching the dagger tightly. Just then, the creature stopped, its head tilted as if it had heard us. I felt my heart skip a beat as its monstrous gaze locked onto our hiding place. Time seemed to freeze, the whispers crescendoing into a chaotic storm. "Now!" I shouted, thrusting the dagger forward and rushing from our hiding spot, aiming for the lanterns. I could hear the creature's surprised roar echo behind me as I crashed into a crate. Glass shattered, flames erupted, flaring brightly in the darkness. Light illuminated the chamber, and for a brief moment, I could see the creature in all its horrifying glory, its eyes glimmering with malice, jagged teeth bared in an expression that sent a wave of icy dread coursing through my veins. I knew I had to keep moving. "Jenny, this way!" I yelled, sweeping across the room toward a side passage that I could barely make out in the light. As I sprinted, the flames cast dancing shadows, warping the shapes on the walls into nightmarish figures. The whispers screamed louder, drowning out my thoughts, urging me to stop, to turn back, warning me of the doom that awaited. But I pushed forward, praying Jenny was right behind me. We darted down the passage, the heat from the flames licking at our heels. Regret washed over me as the fear turned into a desperate need to escape. I glanced back, seeing the creature's silhouette emerging from the light and stepping into the shadows, its eyes reflecting a primal fury. "This way!" I cried again, directing us toward a faint glow ahead, my hands trembling around the dagger. The passage twisted and turned, every corner offering unfamiliar darkness. The whispers clawed at my psyche, trying to ensnare my thoughts. But then I caught sight of something, an open door at the end of the hall, cutting through the oppressive darkness like a beacon of hope. My heart leaped, and I bolted for it, feeling the urgency of our lives hanging in the balance. In those last few moments before reaching the door, everything seemed to happen in a blur. The air was thick with danger, and every instinct told me to run faster. "Almost there!" I yelled, our feet pounding against the floor in rhythm, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We reached the door just as it slammed behind us, the sound a thunderous declaration of our escape. But the creature's howl echoed through the hall, sending another wave of dread crashing over me. I grabbed the doorknob and flung it open. I threw open the door, expecting to stumble into the light of freedom. Instead, I was met with a deeper darkness, a narrow corridor that stretched endlessly before us. "Where are we?" Jenny gasped, peering into the void, uncertainty etched on her face. "I don't know, but we can't stay here," I urged, my voice a harsh whisper filled with panic. The echoes of the creature's roar still lingered in my ears like a sinister promise, reminding me we were not safe yet. We stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind us, the sound reverberating like a death knell. The air shifted, heavier and colder, wrapping around us like a suffocating blanket. I raised my flashlight, scanning the corridor, but the beam barely reached the walls, which closed in like a tomb. "Let's move," I urged, adrenaline flooding my veins as I tried to push fear aside. We shifted down the corridor, each step sending tingles of dread down my spine. The whispers returned, slower this time, each word laced with malice. "Leave while you can. The darkness hungers." I pressed on, steeling my resolve despite the frost creeping into my soul. The passage twisted and turned, every corner feeling like a descent further into some living nightmare. The walls were damp, the stone cold under my fingertips. I could feel something watching us, an unsettling gaze that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. With each moment, the shadows rushed tighter around us, eager to claim our terrified forms. As we moved deeper, I noticed strange markings on the walls. They resembled those from the book, the same twisted symbols I had seen before. Panic swirled within me, realizing they were spells or warnings, and I wasn't sure which felt worse. "Did you see that?" Jenny suddenly whispered, halting in anger, her eyes wide with fright. "What?" I asked, heartbeat rocketing. Something moved back there. She pointed into the darkness we had just come from. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to turn and look, but something primal warned me not to. "We need to keep going," I thought, resisting the urge to allow fear to enslave my mind. But doubt crept in, forcing me to question our choices. "Let's be quick," I said, urging us forward again. Every step felt like I was stepping into the maw of some unseen beast, ready to snap shut. Then, as we walked onward, the corridor began to twist unnaturally, the shadows deepening in hues of blue and black, almost as if they were alive, swirling and pulsing. My flashlight flickered, the light dimming with each step, a mocking echo of our dwindling hope. I tightened my grip on Jenny's hand as we moved, desperate to keep her close, desperate for a tether to reality. Suddenly, I felt a rush of cold air whip past us, almost like a gust of breath from something hidden in the shadows. I froze, dread pooling in my stomach as I turned. A figure lurked just beyond the flickering light. I squinted but saw only a figure cloaked in shadow, its form elongated and bent. "Did you see it?" I gasped, fear squeezing my chest. "Yes!" Jenny's voice trembled with terror. "We need to go back." But the way we had entered was now lost to me, swallowed by the dark depths behind the veil of shadows. We continued down the hallway, hearts racing, but the oppressive atmosphere felt like a living being, choking the air around us. I could hear the whispers rise into a chaotic crescendo, as if the darkness itself was gathering strength. "Turn back! Flee!" Then we heard it, a low, sinister growl echoing from behind us, reverberating through the corridor. My heart skipped a beat. It was the creature, seeking us, its voice thick with hunger. "Run!" I yelled, adrenaline flooding my limbs. We dashed forward, the cold air battering against us as we sprinted, shadows closing in from all sides. Just ahead, I spotted another door, lit by an eerie glow spilling out beneath it. "Over there!" I shouted, leading us as fast as my legs could carry me. We reached the door, grasping the handle. It felt warm in my palm, contrasting the chill of the corridor. "Open it," Jenny urged, her voice a frantic whisper. I yanked the door wide and stumbled into what looked like an old library, shelves filled with dusty tomes soaring high into darkness, scattered with tattered curtains that danced in non-existent winds. But before we could catch our breath, the door slammed shut behind us, trapping us inside. The air was thick with anticipation, each book seemingly holding its breath. The dim glow came from a solitary lantern hanging above, casting strange shadows on the walls like trapped spirits yearning to escape. "No! No! No!" Panic surged as I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers returned, echoing in the chamber, louder now, a cacophony of voices predicting doom. "You shouldn't have come here. You are not welcome." "The books," I muttered, glancing at the shelves, sensing an urgency. "They might have something we can use. There has to be a way out." Jenny nodded, her eyes darting around the room, searching for something, anything, that might help us escape. I moved towards the nearest shelf, thumbing through ancient texts, pages crumbling beneath my fingertips. The whispers swirled around me, disturbing and dark, urging me to stop. Suddenly, I pulled out a weathered book, its cover surprisingly intact. The title read, "The Boundaries of Darkness." My heart raced as I opened it, the pages filled with illustrations of dark creatures, spells meant to seal or banish them from this world. One particular page caught my eye, depicting a sigil surrounded by intricate patterns. This might be it, I thought, hope igniting within me. But then behind me, I heard a rumble, an unsettling sound that froze the blood in my veins. I turned to see the shadows in the room shift and twist, forming into something solid, something horrifying. The creature loomed before us, its eyes glowing maliciously, the smile stretching across its twisted face, a hideous mockery of joy. "We tried to warn you," it hissed, voice dripping with venom. What was now a full embodiment of darkness reached out with elongated fingers, tendrils of shadow seeping from its body, brushing against the ancient books that surrounded us as if tasting the air. "Get back!" I shouted, instinctively placing myself between Jenny and the darkness. Grabbing the dagger tight, I shouted the words from the sigil I'd just seen, hoping it made sense. "Return to the shadows." The creature lunged forward, snarling in fury, but I felt a surge of energy coursing through me as the words echoed in the air around us. The shadows recoiled, twisting in agony, the creature's form flickering. "Leave us alone!" I yelled, thrusting the dagger forward, the light from my flashlight crackling and igniting the air with energy. As I said the final words of the spell, a blinding pulse radiated out, illuminating the room in brilliant light. The pulse of light erupted like a star exploding in the darkness, washing over the room and illuminating every corner. For a moment, everything felt suspended as if the world held its breath, waiting for the outcome of my desperate act. As the light surged forward, I could see the creature screeching in agony, its twisted face contorted with rage and pain. The shadows recoiled away from the source of light, writhing like they were pulled back by an unseen force. It was both terrifying and mesmerizing, watching the dark being fight against the power of the spell. I felt a jolt of hope mixed with fear. What if this didn't work? What if it only made it angrier? The lantern swung above, casting erratic shadows that danced and flickered, creating a surreal atmosphere. The whispers grew louder, almost as if they were aware of the battle unfolding, urging me on. But the creature was relentless. It lunged again, charging through the light like a hurricane of despair and malice. I gasped, instinctively stepping back even as I held the dagger aloft. "Stay back!" I shouted, the words spilling from my lips in a mixture of desperation and anger. The light pulsed again, brightening as it encircled the creature, forcing it to stagger back. I concentrated harder, focusing on the sigil I had seen in the book, hoping with every fiber of my being that I could channel its power. "Return to the shadows," I repeated, and as the words left my mouth, a surge of energy radiated outwards, slamming into the creature. It roared, a sound so piercing it felt like it reached into my soul, reverberating off the walls. The roar was joined by another cacophony. A chorus of anguished yells began to rise from the shadows around us, a haunting harmony of lost souls. I realized then that the shadows were not just empty. They were filled with the remnants of those who had been taken, their cries merging into the creature's shrieks. It was as if the whole room was alive, bearing witness to the chaos, bearing the weight of lives lost in fear. "Let them go!" I screamed, anger fueling my voice, my hands trembling around the dagger. With that command, the light grew blinding, consuming everything around us. I felt a rush, as if the very air was singing, vibrating with renewed energy. The cries became frantic, desperate, wrapping around me like a tempest of sorrow, urging me to free them. The creature, still fighting, clawed at the light, tendrils of darkness shooting outwards, trying to snatch me back into the cold embrace of despair. Jenny clung to my side, her wide eyes reflecting the chaotic scene. "Please, we need to get out," she begged, her voice frantic. "I can't leave them. Not like this," I cried back, torn between the urge to flee and the desire to fight for those who had suffered. In the midst of the chaos, I spotted a shimmering portal forming where the light met the dark. It looked like an opening to another world, glowing brilliantly and beckoning. "Look," I shouted, realizing it was a way to release the souls trapped in this torment. "I think I can save them. We have to pull them through." I turned back to the creature, heart pounding, and with all the strength I could muster, I shouted the incantation again. "Return to the shadows." The energy pulsed, bright and unyielding, illuminating the chamber. The creature screeched louder, shadows writhing around it, stretching and reaching toward the light, as if desperate to escape. Then, without warning, those shadows began to swirl around me, lifting me off my feet. The sensation was like being caught in a whirlwind of despair, my vision blurring as the anguished souls joined me, their cries growing louder in my ears as their pain poured forth. Just at the moment when I thought I would be completely consumed, I focused harder on the light, letting its warmth wash over me. A blinding flash erupted, and everything fell still for a brief second, darkness and light merging into a brilliant burst. When my vision cleared, I found myself standing in a vast, empty expanse, an endless horizon before me. The air was fresh, surprisingly pure, and I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I turned back to see the creature still trapped, its desperate eyes looking at me, filling with regret and fury. The portal hovered before it, flickering, shimmering with promise. "No!" It howled, its voice an echo of despair. I watched as the tendrils of darkness struggled against the brightness, unwilling to let go of its hold. But then something shifted, something clicked into place. As though sensing my resolve, the energy surged, the portal expanding. I felt a wave of collective hope erupt within me, and with a burst of determination, I stepped closer to the summoning light. "Let them go. You can't hold on to them anymore," I declared fiercely. Something within me ignited, an understanding that I held the power to bridge this divide. I reached deep inside, pulling from every ounce of courage, every memory that reminded me of light and love. Guided by gut instinct, I lifted the dagger, letting it glow bright and fiercely. Finally, this ends now. The shadows warred with the light, yet I alone stood firm, channeling everything I had into the shimmering portal. It pulsed, growing brighter and more alive, reaching towards the struggling souls all around. And then, with an explosive burst of light, It expanded, enveloping everything in its path. And in an instant, a great surge of energy shot through me. I felt the warmth of souls breaking free, their light returning home, washing away the agony they had endured. Peace flooded the chamber, and for a precious moment, the world felt stitched back together, the tortured cries giving way to soft whispers of gratitude, echoing through the air like a gentle breeze. But the victory was short-lived. The creature, wreathed in shadows, began to thrash violently, its form twisting and liquefying in spite of the brilliant light, desperately clawing for a way to escape. "No!" I shouted, unable to contain the panic that flooded through me. Then, unexpectedly, it turned its gaze towards me, its expression softening for a fleeting moment, revealing an essence of sorrow and fear buried deep within its monstrous facade. I was just trying to survive. It breathed, words thick with despair as it faded further into the shadows. In that moment, a pang of empathy surged through me. The creature was a victim of its own darkness, lost to the void. But no one should have to suffer like this. As the light dimmed, I felt the dagger pulsing in my hand, its power waning. I needed to make a choice, to finish this fight or offer the chance for redemption. "Your darkness doesn't define you," I shouted, hoping to reach whatever part of it craved freedom. "You can change. You can be free." It didn't seem to understand. The shadows began to engulf it, wrapping around its twisted form, dragging it down into the darkness below. The chamber began to shake, signaling the end of an era. "Jenny!" I yelled, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward the portal, feeling every moment hang delicately in the balance. Together, we jumped into the light as the walls of the library began to collapse under the weight of the battle, the shadows screaming in fury as they were pulled through the portal. We landed on the other side, rolling onto hard ground, gasping, breathless, and alive. I landed hard on the ground, the breath knocked out of me. The air felt electric, zapping against my skin as I tried to catch my breath. Jenny tumbled beside me, wide-eyed and gasping, staring around at our new surroundings. We were no longer in that dark library. Instead, we lay on a deserted street, shrouded in an eerie fog that twisted and curled like fingers reaching out. The buildings around us were shadowy and silent, their windows cracked and dark, giving an impression of a town forgotten by time. "Where are we?" Jenny murmured, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, spine tingling as I pushed myself to my feet. The street was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As I scanned the area, I noticed movement in the distance. Shadows flitted between the buildings, darting in and out of the obscuring mist, and I felt a prickle of panic grow at the base of my neck. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing to the movement. "Yeah," she whispered, clinging to me like a lifeline. "What is it?" "I have no idea," I admitted, heart pounding, "but we shouldn't stick around to find out." Taking her hand, I led her down the fog-laden street, trying to suppress the chilling realization that we might have escaped one nightmare only to stumble into another. The silence was unsettling, disturbed only by the distant sound of a low, mournful wailing that echoed through the air, sending chills skittering down my spine. As we walked, the shadows seemed to grow bolder, trailing us. I glanced over my shoulder, convinced I saw figures emerging from the edges of the fog. They looked like twisted versions of people, limbs elongated, faces obscured by the darkness. "Keep moving," I urged, quickening my pace. "We need to find shelter, or—" Before I could finish, a sharp sound pierced the stillness, the snap of a twig, echoing like a gunshot in the silence. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't drag my feet. "Did you hear that?" Jenny asked, eyes wide with fright. "Yes," I replied, feeling the very air grow heavy around us. The sound was followed by guttural growls, low and menacing, reverberating through the fog. The shadows flickered closer, revealing more of their twisting forms, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I pulled Jenny close, our breath visible in the cold air, both of us too terrified to separate. Let's find a door or something. Anything, I said sharply. Just then, a building loomed into sight, half hidden by the mist. Its door stood slightly ajar, swaying in the wind as if inviting us in. Should we go in? Jenny whispered, but there was an urgency in her voice that suggested we both knew we had little choice. We have to, I said, moving toward the door. We stepped through into the darkened interior, silence enveloping us, the door creaking ominously as it swung shut behind us. The room was dimly lit by a flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls. Dust hung in the air, settling like an unwelcome blanket, and among the clutter, I spotted old furniture draped in white sheets, each one looking like a ghost stealing a peek at us from the corner of the room. The oppressive atmosphere tightened around us as I peered into the darkness. What is this place? I don't know, Jenny replied, her voice barely above a whisper. As we stood frozen in fear, I thought I sensed movement in the corner of my eye. I turned, staring into a darkened hallway that seemed to stretch infinitely beyond. Come on, we have to keep moving, I urged, grabbing her hand and pulling her forward. The hallway was narrow and lined with faded family portraits. Their eyes followed us as we passed, each gaze sending chills across my skin. I stopped mid-stride, captivated. One portrait showed a family, but their faces were obscured, like they had been wiped from existence. It feels like they're watching us, Jenny said, shivering. I nodded, unease pooling in my gut. There was a strange heaviness in the air, like the walls held secrets long buried. Just as we pressed forward, a soft sound drifted through the hallway, the creaking of floorboards, almost like footsteps trailing behind us. Did you hear that? Yeah, I replied, tension mounting in my chest. We hurried further into the hallway, each footfall echoing in the oppressive quiet, but the sound seemed to grow louder, more pronounced. Had we attracted attention? At the end of the corridor, I spotted a door, solid and heavy, my only hope for escape. I rushed toward it, heart racing, dragging Jenny along. But before I reached for the handle, the chilling growl returned, echoing throughout the space. The shadows seemed to flare to life, swirling around, blocking off our path, wrapping around us like vipers ready to strike. Run! I shouted, adrenaline flooding my system as instinct kicked in. I gripped Jenny's hand tightly as we sprinted down the hallway, the shadows closing in around us. The air thickened with despair and madness, and I could feel the dark energy pulsing, seeking to engulf us. The oppressive silence was replaced with a cacophony of whispers, rising and falling like the tide, taunting us with all the voices that had once inhabited this desolate place. Leave us, free us, they pleaded, their tones haunting and bereft of hope. We barreled forward, my heart pounding in time with the frantic whispers. With every step, the weight of despair pressed down harder, making each movement more labored. Then, I noticed another door on my right, slightly ajar. There! I pointed, desperation fueling me. We veered toward it, bursting through, and suddenly, we were in a larger room filled with shelves aligned head to toe with twisted relics. Haunted dolls, cracked mirrors, broken clocks, all littered across the floor. I scanned the room for an exit, but the shadows followed us, slinking in through the door like they had slipped between gaps in reality. Jenny's breath quickened, panic rising in her voice. What do we do now? Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it, a mirror, shattered and glimmering, its shards reflecting the light in eerie patterns. As the shadows approached, something drew me toward it, an impulse I could not resist. Maybe it can show us the way out, I shouted, racing to the mirror. I gripped the frame, peering into its depths heart, pounding as I called out, show us the escape. The shards flickered, each jagged piece illuminating the room with shimmering light. Images danced before my eyes, visions of smoke, fire, and dark figures lurking in shadows, growing closer. I felt the urgency mounting, pressure clawing at my throat. The whispers morphed, growing clearer as the shadows twisted around us, urging us to flee. Help! Help us! They pleaded, voices layered and echoing like a haunting refrain. The mirror began to swirl, images twisting wildly, and then suddenly, I saw it. A glowing portal like the one we'd escaped from earlier. "Jenny!" I screamed, grabbing her arm. "I think it's showing us how to get out." But just as I turned to lead her to the portal, the growling intensified, and the shadows surged forward, swirling wildly, intent on claiming us. "We don't have much time," I yelled, heart racing, the urge to flee overwhelming. "Go!" she shouted, driving me forward. We dashed toward the mirror, and as we neared it, I could feel the heat radiating from the portal, flickering just beyond the glass. The shadows clawed at us, tendrils stretching like vengeful hands, seeking to ensnare our retreating forms. With one last push, I leaped into the mirror's depths, dragging Jenny with me as the darkness enveloped us. I plunged through the mirror's surface, a rush of light and darkness swirling around us like a whirlwind. I felt as if I were being stretched, pulled apart, then suddenly I landed hard on a cold, damp floor. I blinked a couple of times to clear the shimmering spots from my vision. As I regained my senses, I realized we were in another dimly lit room, but this one felt different, more sinister. The air was thick with an unsettling chill, and I knew instantly we were not out of danger yet. Shadows crept across the walls, twisting in grotesque shapes as if alive. I could hear an unsettling sound, soft, rhythmic thumping, like the beating of a heart echoing in the silence. "Where are we now?" Jenny asked, her voice trembling slightly, anxiety curling through her words. "I don't know," I replied, my own voice sounding small against the backdrop of the pulsing thrum. As I stood up, the oppressive darkness hung around us, heavy and suffocating. I scanned the room, taking in the details: cracked walls, dust-covered furniture, and strange symbols etched into the floor, glowing faintly in the half-light, as if they held some dark energy beneath them. The rhythmic thumping grew louder, reverberating in my chest. An instinct told me it came from somewhere deeper in the building. The shadows at the edges of the room flickered, looming closer as if drawn by the sound. "Maybe we should check it out," I suggested, despite the knot forming in my stomach. Jenny looked hesitant, but I could see the determination in her eyes. "Okay, but we stick together," I nodded, pulling her close as we moved toward the source of the sound, hearts racing in sync. Each step felt like a challenge, the ground beneath us almost squelching with every hesitant touch, as if warning us against disturbing the darkness nearby. We entered a narrow hallway, barely illuminated by a flickering light that hung above, casting eerie shadows that seemed to reach for us. The walls were damp, dripping with a thick, black substance that glistened in the dim light, creating a trail leading us deeper into the unknown. The rhythmic thumping grew louder, now accompanied by soft whispers that flowed through the air like a cold wind. "Help us! Let us go!" they pleaded, the sound echoing like ghosts trapped in an endless loop of torment. "Can you hear that?" Jenny asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Yeah," I replied, trying to mask my own unease. "We have to keep moving." As we progressed down the hallway, the walls began to close in around us, the air thickening with the smell of decay and something metallic, like blood. My heart raced as the whispers intensified, becoming urgent and frantic, pushing us along as though they wanted us to hurry to their aid. Suddenly, the floor trembled beneath us, sending a shiver down my spine, and I nearly lost my balance. "Did you feel that?" I gasped, looking around wildly, searching for something to cling to. The moment I spoke, the thumping stopped. A heavy silence settled in, and I felt the air grow colder, like ice settling on my skin. "No, no, no!" Jenny whimpered, her voice cracking as panic began to set in. Before I could respond, from the darkness ahead, a figure emerged slowly, its shape tall and gaunt, shrouded in shadow. It moved with an unnatural grace, as if gliding rather than walking, and I felt dread envelop me like a suffocating blanket. "Who's there?" I shouted, attempting to sound braver than I felt. The figure paused, allowing the light to caress its features, revealing sunken eyes glowing with a sickly brightness. Stale air filled my lungs as it spoke, its voice a haunting whisper. "Help me. What do you want?" I demanded, forcing myself to take a hesitant step back, dragging Jenny along with me. Its expression twisted into something grotesque. A sad smile pulled across lips that cracked open to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. "They want me free, but I can't leave." I exchanged a frightened glance with Jenny, feeling her tension radiate beside me. "What do you mean?" I asked, now feeling the urge to flee clawing at my insides. The figure's eyes flared with an inner fire. "The darkness binds me here, feeds on my despair. I can't escape, but you can." Before I realized what was happening, the room began to spin. The walls shimmered, collapsing inward, as if reality itself was warping and shifting. I grabbed Jenny's hand tighter, our fingers intertwined as we fought against the pull of the dark energy wrapping around us. "Run!" I shouted, but panic knotted my stomach. We bolted down the hallway, the figure's laughter ringing sharply in our ears, echoing as we stumbled forward. "Don't leave," it cried out, the shadows swirling closer, grasping at our heels. I could feel the thirst for escape growing stronger, the pulse of darkness seeking to lunge at us once more. The hallway twisted, turning into a maze as we raced through, desperately seeking a way out. I felt the ground tremble again, and the air thickened as the darkness surged forward, enveloping everything in a cloud of despair. I glanced behind us just in time to see the figure morphing, its sad smile replaced with a grimace of fury. Shadows erupted from its form, reaching for us, dark tendrils extending like claws, grasping hungrily at the space we had left behind. It felt like I was running through a nightmare, each step amplifying the terror swelling in my chest. "Find a door, anything!" I shouted, eyes scanning our surroundings. Then ahead, I saw it, a faint glow shining through the shadows. My heart leaped into my throat as I dragged Jenny forward, adrenaline propelling us toward the promise of light. As we neared it, I felt a rush of hope coursing through my veins, but the shadows clawed at us, their grip tightening around my ankles, pulling me back. "Keep going," I urged Jenny, forcing myself to ignore the suffocating presence of darkness. With incredible effort, I broke free, lunging toward the light, praying it was our salvation. The shadows writhed and hissed, desperately trying to reclaim us, their whispers shifting into furious roars. We barreled through the doorway, crashing into another room, a vast chamber, brighter than anything we had seen. The air was charged with energy, electric and invigorating, and I thought we might finally be safe. But then I heard it, the heart-pounding rhythm returning, louder than before. The room was filled with dozens of mirrors, their reflections warped and twisted, creating a maze of distorted images. I couldn't focus. Panic gripped me as I searched for an exit. And then, in the distance, I saw the figure again, looming within the maze, its eyes glowing with an eerie intensity. "You can't escape me," it shrieked, its voice a mix of rage and sorrow. Jenny and I stood frozen, the oppressive force squeezing the air from my lungs, an icy dread weaving its way into my very being. As the figure advanced, I felt time slow, each second stretching into eternity. Together, I murmured, looking at Jenny, and I could see her determination mirrored in my own fear. "Together," she echoed, and as the figure drew closer, our bond strengthened, and a surge of defiance ignited within me. Knowing we needed to face this head-on, I took a deep breath and stepped toward the figure, ready to confront whatever awaited. As I took a step forward, the air thickened, swirling with tension. The figure loomed closer, its distorted features twisting into a mask of fury and despair. It was as if every shadow in the room had come alive to serve its purpose, coiling around us, eager to trap us once more. "Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice steady despite the fear curling in my stomach. Each word felt like a challenge in this heavy silence. "Because you are perfect, a vessel for my release," it bellowed, its voice sharp and piercing. The once mournful whispers now morphed into a cacophony of deranged laughter, echoing off the walls of the chamber, filling my ears with dread. Jenny squeezed my hand tightly, and I could feel her trembling beside me, yet there was a flicker of strength in her grip that urged me to stand tall. I took another step, determination surging through me, the urge to flee clawing at my mind. "You don't own us. We can escape." The figure paused, its glowing eyes narrowing. The shadows around it writhed as if in anticipation, a sinister dance of darkness that made every hair on my body stand on end. "You think you can escape the darkness? It is the very essence of my existence." With that, the room trembled again, and a violent rumble shook the ground beneath our feet, forcing us to stumble. I looked back at the mirrors, their surfaces rippling with energy, chaotic reflections swirling before our eyes. A disturbing sense of urgency ignited within me, telling me that we needed to act or succumb to whatever awaited us. "Look," I yelled at Jenny, pointing to the mirrors. "They might show us a way out." As she turned, the distorted reflections seemed to pulse with light, revealing glimpses of places we had been, moments of fright, and flashes of hope. Among them, I saw a vision of what looked like an entrance, a door carved from ancient wood, radiating warmth and light, beckoning us to escape. "Let's go," I urged, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We dashed toward the closest mirror, its surface shimmering as if alive. Just before I reached it, a shadow shot out, coiling around my ankle, trying to pull me back into the abyss. "Don't let it take you," Jenny cried, panic stark in her voice. With a surge of energy, I kicked it away, feeling the coldness fade as I lunged forward, dragging Jenny along with me. As the mirror responded to our touch, it glowed brighter, illuminating the room in a blinding flash. The laughter of the figure morphed into furious growls, shadows clawing at us, seeking to reclaim their prize. "Now!" I shouted, grabbing Jenny's hand and pushing us through the mirror. We were pulled into a vortex of light, the world around us bending and twisting. I could feel the darkness clawing at our heels, its desperate whispers wrapping around us, filling my mind with terror. Then everything went black for a moment. My stomach dropped as if falling from a great height, and I caught a brief glimpse of the figure, its eyes wide with rage, before a blinding light surged, and suddenly, I gasped as I landed hard on the ground once again. I rolled onto my side, dazed and gasping for breath. As the haze lifted, I realized we were outside, under a crooked, twisted tree with gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The air was still thick with the scent of decay, but no shadows lingered nearby. "Are we safe?" Jenny panted, glancing around uneasily. I think so," I replied, heart still hammering against my ribs. But as I looked up, a creeping sensation washed over me. The tree was not just any tree. Its bark resembled human faces twisted in anguish, weeping sap that glimmered in the dim moonlight. They seemed alive, pained expressions frozen on their surfaces. "Look at that," I said, involuntarily taking a step back. Jenny shivered, pulling closer. "This doesn't feel right. We need to go." But the ground beneath us began to tremble again, and from the shadows, shapes began to twist out of the darkness. Figures, once bound in the haunted space, now broke free, their forms ghostly and frail, echoing the same whispers from before. "Help us! Help us!" they cried, reaching out with skeletal hands, as if their very existence depended on our response. "No!" I yelled, instinctively stepping away. "We can't help them." As I turned to grab Jenny's arm, she seemed transfixed by the sight. "They're suffering. We can't just leave them." Caught between the urge to escape and the pull of compassion, I felt a war brewing inside me. The figures continued to reach for us, their cries swelling into a desperate plea that made my heart ache. A sudden gust of wind screamed past us, carrying the dark laughter of the figure from the mirrored room. "You think you've escaped? You are mine." I grabbed Jenny's hand more firmly, feeling the warmth of her skin against the chill creeping through the air. "We need to find a way to break their bond with it," I urged, looking into her eyes. But just as Jenny opened her mouth to respond, the tree behind us shuddered violently, and two more figures popped up, their arms outstretched like they were begging for salvation. The faces in the bark wrinkled as if crying, sap flowing like tears down their twisted forms. We were trapped in a nightmare, surrounded by tortured souls and unrelenting shadows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if we didn't act soon, we'd become part of this tragic scene as well. "Let's go back," I suggested desperately, glancing around for any sign of the way we had come. "No, we can't return to the shadows," Jenny insisted, gripping my arm. "We need another way out. Maybe we can help them." Something in her eyes ignited a spark of determination within me. "Fine, but if we do this, we need to act fast," I replied, steeling myself against the growing dread. Together, we approached the mournful figures. Their skeletal hands trembled as they reached out, and I felt a chill brush against my skin. "What do you need?" I asked, voice quavering. "Free us, break the curse," they whispered in haunting unison. As I stood in the midst of this torment, I felt the flicker of the portal we had seen in the mirror, and I remembered the glowing symbols etched into the floor back in that dark chamber. "Do you know how?" I pressed, hope igniting in my chest. Without waiting for an answer, I turned to Jenny. "We need to find those symbols again, somehow. They might hold the key to setting them free." "Yes, maybe they can work for them too," she exclaimed, emboldened by the thought. As the figures drew closer, their faces twisted in anguish, yet somehow hopeful. "Follow us," they rasped, and I felt a strange pull from their gazes, guiding me deeper into the heart of this nightmare. With Jenny beside me, we moved cautiously, following the tortured voices leading us through the darkness. Each step resonated through my bones, the rhythmic thumping in the air escalating again, driving us toward a destination unknown. As we followed the anguished figures, I felt the very ground shift beneath us, moving like a living entity. It felt like we were being drawn into some sinister heartbeat, echoing loudly in time with our racing hearts. The figures led us deeper into the thickened darkness, around corners where light seemed to vanish and despair reigned supreme. "Are you sure we should trust them?" I whispered to Jenny, my voice barely rising above the echoing shadows. "They're suffering just like we were," she replied, determination lining her tone. "We have to try." The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of damp earth and something rotting. The whispers intensified, the sounds swirling around us, filling my head with unsettling images, flashes of a life lived in anguish, trapped within this hellish realm. I glanced at the figures, their faces a mix of desperation and hope as they guided us. Quickly, one of them urged, its voice barely above a rasp. "Before it sees." I felt a chill race down my spine, and I picked up speed, tugging Jenny along, desperate to move faster. We rounded a final corner, coming face to face with a vast stone archway, steeped in darkness. Above it, the faint glow of symbols pulsed like the remnants of a beating heart. "This is it," I breathed, my heart hammering in my chest. The figures stepped back from the archway, their hollow eyes wide with anticipation. I felt the energy radiating from the symbols, a faint warmth pushing against the cold darkness that enveloped us. Had they once been living beings? I could only wonder as I bravely approached the archway's threshold. "Stand back," I said, raising my hands in a gesture of peace. With a deep breath, I focused on the symbols, envisioning them spiraling with power, ready to unlock whatever horrors lurked beyond. I could feel an ancient energy coursing through me, mixing with the dread and desperation around us. The more I concentrated, the clearer the symbols became, glowing brighter until they cast a shimmering light throughout the chamber. The figures' faces reflected that light, locked in expressions both mournful and grateful. But the shadows, those blighted creatures, stirred restlessly, as if sensing the shift in power. "Faster," Jenny urged, glancing nervously over her shoulder, as the chilling laughter of the figure we had fled echoed through the dark passage again. "Help us," the shadows urged, their voices rising in a discordant symphony. "Free us, or we'll all be trapped forever." The tension in the air thickened, closing in on us like a vice. I struck out, my hand reaching for the nearest symbol, feeling a pulse resonate with my heart. With a surge of power, I pressed my palm against the stone. The moment I did, an electric shock coursed through my veins, forcing me backward, but I didn't let go. Instead, I channeled every ounce of my fear into that connection. The reaction was instantaneous. The air crackled as bright light exploded around us, illuminating the anguished faces of the figures. Their wails grew louder, transforming from sorrowful cries into sounds of jubilation. "It's working!" Jenny shouted, hope flickering in her voice. Yet, as the shadows writhed violently, the echoing laugh of the figure grew stronger, closer. "No! You cannot leave. I will take what is mine." The chamber shook, and the figures began to fade, dissipating like tendrils of smoke. I could feel the bond between us stretching thin, and I silently begged them to hold on. The symbols glowed brighter with each heartbeat, but the shadows intertwined, forming a mass of darkness, swirling in fury. It took on a shape, coalescing into the monstrous form we had encountered in the mirrored room. Driven by desperation, I fought against the overwhelming tide of fear. "Help us!" I yelled at the figures frantically. With one final burst of energy, I redirected my focus to the symbols, letting everything drain from me, the strength of my spirit mixing with the last remnants of their souls. Glowing threads of light began to weave together, forming a barrier between us and the monstrous figure. It screeched with rage, attempting to break through, shadows reaching for me, hungry and relentless. "Hold the barrier," I urged, feeling Jenny's hand slip from mine as she struggled to maintain her place. "I'm trying," she shouted, her voice straining, eyes wide with fear. I could feel the pressure mounting, the darkness threatening to engulf both of us. Memories raced through my mind, light laughter, the warmth of sunlight, and those who had stood by me in moments of despair. I drew on everything, channeling it into the spell. Suddenly, the ghostly figures surged forward, joining their essence with mine. They enveloped me in an embrace of warmth, pushing back against the shadows, their voices filling the air with a haunting melody of freedom and hope. Together, they cried in unison. The light intensified, and I felt a rush of warmth wrap around me. I could see the figure in the shadows waver, its monstrous form trembling as the barrier pulsed brighter, illuminating everything before us. Then, in an explosion of light, the darkness shattered with a furious cry, dispersing into countless wisps that spiraled into the air before vanishing. We stood there, breathless and shaken, as silence descended upon us. The shadows melted away, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in the air where they had been. "What just happened?" Jenny said, her eyes scanning the now tranquil chamber. "We freed them. I felt it," I replied, still trying to regain my composure. As I looked around, the archway filled with light led us to the next path we must take. But just before we stepped forward, I caught one last glimpse of the figures, their faces now calm, serene, and free. They floated just beyond the archway, the strange symbols glowing softly in their wake. "Thank you," they whispered in unison, brightened by the light, and then they vanished into the ether, leaving us with a profound sense of relief that I hadn't expected. But before I could catch my breath, I felt a stirring in the air. The ground beneath us trembled slightly, and shadows began to creep back into the room, coiling around us like snakes. A horrible realization hit me. This wasn't over yet. As the shadows slithered around us, my heart raced, each beat reverberating through the silence that followed the chaos. The atmosphere shifted, growing heavy with malevolence, the warmth of the vanquished figures leaving me feeling strangely hollow. "Look!" I shouted, pointing as more shadows coalesced, creeping toward us like dark tendrils seeking to ensnare us once again. They wove intricate patterns across the ground, outlining a ritualistic design, pulsing faintly with a sinister energy. "We have to move!" Jenny cried, panic etched across her face. The shadows seemed to glide along effortlessly, their forms flickering, making it difficult to distinguish where one ended and another began. Before I could respond, I heard a low growl resonate from within the swirling mass. The darkness condensed into a figure, one I had hoped never to see again. It was a grotesque embodiment of rage, eyes shining like dying embers, filled with vengeance and hunger. "You think you can escape me?" the figure hissed, its voice a jarring mix of malice and mockery that sent chills down my spine. "You awakened me, and now you will pay for your insolence." I felt the air grow thick and heavy, as if the very space around us was pressing down, warping my sense of reality. I glanced at Jenny, her expression a mixture of fear and determination, and I knew we had to think fast. "Maybe the symbols can help us again," I suggested, searching frantically for any remnants of the energy we had just unleashed. The figure laughed, a heart-stopping sound that echoed off the cold stone walls. "Those symbols are nothing more than memories of the past. You think they will save you?" But I could not let fear paralyze me. I looked at the symbols still faintly glowing around the archway, their light fighting against the encroaching darkness. "We need to use what we've learned," I urged, moving toward the patterns engraved in the stone. With each step, I felt the pull of the shadows growing stronger, almost as if they understood my intent. I focused on the symbols, trying to connect with their energy once more while the monstrous figure advanced, its shadowy form splitting the air between us. "Foolish child, you cannot wield what you do not understand," it snarled, its voice rising in pitch, resonating with furious intensity. "No, we can do this," I said, trying to drown out its cruel taunts. I reached out, letting my fear fuel the connection. A current sparked within me, igniting a fire that clashed against the overwhelming darkness. Jenny grasped my hand, and I felt her strength bolster my resolve. Together, we pressed our palms against the ancient symbols, uniting our wills. The warmth surged back, pulsing with light, illuminating the shadows like moonlight cutting through a heavy fog. As the energies entwined, a barrier began to form around us, dancing on the edge of reality. Yet, the figure cackled, its shadowy limbs reaching out, attempting to break the emerging glow. "You think you can stop me? I am eternal." "No, you're wrong," I shouted, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through me. "You are nothing without the darkness." With each word, I drew strength from the symbols, feeling the vivid light wrap around us, like protective wings. "We will not be your prisoners." The barrier grew brighter, forcing the figure back, yet the shadows pushed harder, swarming in relentless fury. It screeched, a sound akin to shattering glass, and I could feel the very air vibrating with its rage. Then, suddenly, from within the depths of the swirling shadows, something else emerged, glimmers of light that flickered like stars against the dark backdrop. They zipped around us, weaving in and out of the shadows, illuminating the faces of the lost souls who had once been trapped here. "Join us," they cried. "We will rise." It was a plea fused with a promise, and I felt the hope in their words merge with our courage. With one final push, we directed all our energy toward the encroaching darkness, each of us invoking the flames of our desires: freedom, safety, light. The fabric of reality ripped apart with a resonating crack, and the shadows recoiled, twisting into hideous shapes. The monstrous figure howled, a cacophony of despair laced with anger, as the barrier expanded outward in a blinding flash. As the light burst forth, the shadows began to shatter, fracturing into motes of darkness that disbanded into nothingness. I could feel the grip of fear loosening, the weight lifting from my chest as I stood firm and resolute. But in the midst of our triumph, an alarming thought struck me. What if this wasn't the end? What if this was merely a phase in a never-ending cycle? Before I could voice my concerns, the ground trembled once again, but this tremor felt different, sharper, more aggressive, like a growl from a beast awakening. "What now?" Jenny whispered, glancing around as the light dimmed and darkness seeped back in. The symbols flickered, their energy waning as shadows seeped back into existence. My heart sank. This wasn't over yet. I had hoped for escape, but it seemed like we were ensnared in a trap of our own making. The earth beneath us split open with a resounding roar, and I felt myself falling. Instinctively, I grabbed Jenny, holding on tight as the darkness enveloped us once more, pulling us into a gaping void. We landed hard, the impact jarring our bones. I groaned and pushed myself up, scanning our surroundings. The shadows loomed overhead, but we were in a different realm now. The atmosphere was thick with despair, and sickly sweet odors permeated the space, reminding me of decay. The walls pulsated, lined with what appeared to be tendrils that slithered like snakes, eager to reach us. Twisting shadows danced along the walls, flickering like haunting flames. I turned to Jenny, her wide eyes reflecting my fear. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I responded, feeling a mix of dread and determination. "But we need to find a way out." In the dimness, I could make out shapes forming on the walls, grotesque faces whispering, their mouths moving but not a sound escaping. Their hollow eyes followed us, echoing the feelings of pain and loss. A ripple passed through the floor, and I could hear a low, throaty laugh echoing, harmonizing with the whispers. The oppressive sense of dread enveloped us, making it hard to breathe. "You can't escape. You are mine now. Forever." A shiver crawled up my spine as I recognized that chilling voice again. I tried to swallow my fear, but it wouldn't go down. The echo of that cruel laugh resonated in my ears like an ominous warning bell. I looked at Jenny. The worry mirrored in her eyes sent a jolt of clarity through me. We weren't just fighting against a monster. We were trapped in a web of shadows and horror, and this time, we had to outsmart it. "Let's find something to defend ourselves," I insisted, scanning the murky space around us. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, curling tendrils creeping toward us like disapproving fingers, while the faces in the shadows contorted in agony, begging for release. They drew nearer, the whispers swirling around us. They seemed to beckon me deeper, enticing me to lose myself in their despair. "Over there!" Jenny pointed toward a darkened recess. My heart raced as I dashed to the shadows, hoping against hope that something inside could give us an advantage. As I reached the edge of the hollow space, I spotted what looked like a rusted dagger, half buried in the ground. Its blade was jagged and dark, stained with an unknown substance that shimmered unsettlingly in the dim light. As I pulled it free, the room shook violently, and the whispers turned into wails, a cacophony of sorrow flooding my ears. "Leave this place. It is not meant for you," they pleaded, their breath cold against my skin. "Whatever that is, I don't think we should touch it," Jenny said, her voice trembling, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was our only hope. "What choice do we have?" I shot back, gripping the dagger tightly. "We can either try this or be consumed by that thing." Determined, I turned back to the center of the space, just as the shadows began to solidify again, reshaping into the monstrous figure with eyes like smoldering coals. It was once more ready to attack. "I can take your souls," it roared, face twisting into a horrific grin that revealed rows of jagged teeth. "No one escapes me. Now hold on, let's be strategic about this," I said, a mix of anger and fear rising within me. Stepping forward, clutching the dagger tight, I yelled, "You don't own us. We will not be part of your nightmare." The creature screeched, its voice shrill and defiant. It lunged at us, shadows trailing like a dark cape behind it. I could see the sharp edges, the darkness wrapping around its limbs like hungry serpents ready to strike. With fear pushing me forward, I gathered my strength and slashed at the air, hoping the dagger would hold some secret power. As it cut through the darkness, the blade glowed momentarily, casting a fleeting light that momentarily blinded the figure. It recoiled, and I saw its fear. For a moment, I felt triumph. But then the shadows roared back, swirling furiously as though angered by the trivial wound. "Do you think that little blade can save you?" It sneered, the darkness swirling around it thickening, as if emboldened by my attempt. Jenny stepped beside me, her face resolute as a flicker of defiance ignited within her gaze. "We have to focus together," she urged. I nodded and raised the dagger high, channeling my energy into it. The glow intensified, filling the space with light and echoing our mutual will to escape. Together, we echoed, and I hurled the dagger straight at the figure. It flew through the air, bursting through the shadows that tried to snatch it back, the light erupting brilliantly as it struck. An ear-splitting laugh filled the chamber, mingling with gasps from the embracing shadows. The dagger pierced the creature, unraveling the very essence of the darkness, and I watched in horror as it began to disintegrate before my eyes. Yet, as I reveled in that moment of victory, I suddenly felt a ripple in the air. The chamber trembled with a new force. I realized too late that I may have unleashed something even more terrifying. The shadows screamed, and before I could comprehend what was happening, the walls around me undulated as if realizing they were no longer bound. Chasms opened, revealing a deeper darkness below, a realm more horrifying than the one we had faced. "Oh no, we have to go," Jenny shouted, grabbing my arm as the ground continued to split beneath our feet like a gaping maw, ready to swallow us whole. I barely managed to keep my footing as the roar of darkness echoed again, twisting and turning until I felt dizziness strike. The entities that had once been trapped here swirled angrily, merging with a new darkness that was far more sinister and powerful. I could hear their pleas, their agony becoming a chilling lullaby that threatened to pull me under. My heart raced as I fought to break free from the feelings of dread closing in around me. We stumbled backward, barely avoiding the vortex that threatened to drag us down. "Push against it," I yelled, instinctively reaching for anything to hold on to as my mind raced. Then, stumbling back, I grabbed Jenny's hand tighter than ever. "We can't give up now." But the shadows rose higher, forming waves that crashed against us like 1,000 desperate hands trying to pull us into the abyss. "Accept your fate. You belong to me," the creature roared, its limbs stretching outward, enveloping us in an oppressive cloak of despair. As the darkness threatened to tighten around us, I forced a memory into my mind. The feeling of sunlight on my face, the warmth of companionship. I remembered the hope of freedom and the lost souls who had just slipped through our fingers. "We will not be your sacrifice," I shouted defiantly, even as the shadows closed in. Jenny squeezed my hand. "Hold on," she cried, her eyes shining with resolve. And in that moment, I felt a spark rise within me, pushing against the crushing darkness. Grabbing whatever energy lingered in the atmosphere, I let out a furious scream. "Enough!" The shadows twisted and contorted, a furious wail erupting from the creature as the light surged from our combined energies, breaking through the fabric of despair. We had no choice but to leap toward the gaping chasm, trusting our instincts that it might lead us to safety. As we plunged down, I felt the darkness retreat, a final shriek echoing behind us as I clung to the remnants of hope that we might escape this nightmare alive. We hurtled through darkness, plummeting into an abyss that felt endless. My heart raced with every moment as I held tight to Jenny. I had no idea where we would land or what horrors lurked below, but the weight of despair above us faded as we fell deeper. The air grew colder, a biting chill creeping beneath my skin. As the shadows vanished, an eerie silence enveloped us, pressing in from all sides. I felt a rush of anxiety, the kind that clawed at the back of my mind, hinting at unseen dangers. Suddenly, we hit the ground with a dull thud, rolling to a stop on what felt like moist earth. The texture of the ground was unsettling, sticky, and oozing, like something alive. I quickly shoved myself up, instinctively scanning our surroundings. We found ourselves in a cavernous space illuminated by a faint, sickly glow that seemed to emit from the walls themselves, covered in strange, pulsating veins that throbbed as if breathing. "Where are we?" Jenny whispered, her voice echoing softly in the stillness. "I have no clue," I replied, unease seeping into my thoughts. I pushed myself to my feet, pulling Jen up with me. My eyes began to adjust, and I noticed odd shapes moving along the edges of the cavern, barely visible in the dim light. Figures coalesced, their silhouettes shifting with an unsettling grace, as if they were part of the shadows we had escaped. As we moved cautiously deeper, a chorus of whispers filled the air, sounding like distant cries that wormed their way into my mind. What do they want? I wondered, heart pounding like a drum. The words wrapped around me, tugging at my sanity, urging me to listen. "Join us," they murmured, a melodic chant that felt almost comforting yet deeply disturbing at the same time. "No!" I barked, shaking my head defiantly. I fought to resist their pull, the temptation to give in to the darkness creeping back in. Confusion clouded my thoughts. "We need to find a way out," I urged, gripping Jenny's wrist tighter as we moved further away from the haunting calls. But the deeper we went, the more intense the whispers became, and a sickening sense of despair started to seep back in. Shadows danced on the walls, forming ghostly images that resembled faces we'd never seen. Their eyes stared blankly out into the void, pleading for rescue, or perhaps dragging us into their fate. Then, suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the cavern, causing the ground to tremble beneath our feet. I stumbled, grabbing onto a rugged outcropping for balance. "Did you feel that?" Jenny gasped, her eyes wide with fear. Before I could answer, the walls began to quiver, and a crack opened up in the rock face nearby, oozing a dark substance that glistened like tar. The air thickened with foul-smelling mists as the shadowy figures shuddered, their cries turning into anguished screams. "We have to get away from here," I shouted, adrenaline sparking through my veins. We dashed toward an opening that revealed an even darker tunnel spiraling downward, our only option. The clamor of chaos followed behind us as if the cavern itself was coming alive, eager to reclaim us. As we raced down the twisting passage, I glanced back, catching glimpses of those disembodied faces, mouths contorting in silent screams, their cries eroding the last shreds of my composure. "Go, go!" I urged, pushing Jenny forward as the tunnel grew narrower, enveloping us in cold, damp air. The darkness thickened, barely allowing any light through, but a glimmer ahead caught my attention, a flickering illumination that promised salvation. Just as we reached the source, the glow erupted into an orange blaze, blinding me temporarily. It flickered like a dying flame, and I could make out silhouettes darting back and forth, figures that looked all too familiar. "No," my voice faltered as horror washed over me. The glowing shapes were remnants of the lost souls, now illuminated in their torment. Their features twisted in pain as their ethereal forms hovered, trapped between two worlds. Desperation clawed at my gut as they reached out, fingers curving like a plea for help. "Please save us," one of them cried, voice trembling as it resonated in my ears. In that moment, I felt the weight of their suffering press against me, tightening its grip as guilt surged within. But before I could react, the flames flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted around us in a frenzied dance. "You cannot save them," the shadows hissed, the monstrous voice of the figure still echoing within the depths of my mind. "You'll only become a part of their torment." Fear surged once more, urging me to flee. I looked at Jenny, determination piercing the veil of despair. "We have to move. We can't stay here." Energized by that defiance, I raced deeper into the tunnel, pulling Jenny behind me as we tore past the flickering figures, their desperate cries echoing behind us. Every step felt heavy, as though the world was trying to suck us in, trying to hold us against our will. The light from the flickering flames faded behind us, replaced by engulfing darkness, thick and suffocating. Just when it seemed we were lost completely, I spotted a break in the tunnel ahead. The air tasted fresher, filled with promises of escape. "Almost there," I shouted, urging us forward even as the shadows clawed at our heels. We surged into a larger chamber, and I quickly scanned the new environment. The light in here was different, a ghostly illumination that pulsed gently along the walls. But even as we took a breath of hope, I felt the temperature drop sharply. I turned slowly, an instinctive dread prickling the hairs on my neck. From within the shadows, something stirred, massive shapes emerging, looming over us like monstrous phantoms. They moved with an unsettling grace, their forms shifting and melding, a collage of nightmares made flesh. "Welcome," one rasped with a voice like gravel, each word laden with malice. "You've come to join us at last." I tensed, the dagger still clenched in my hand, but the fear threatened to paralyze me as they closed in with terrifying slowness. Each of their hollow eyes locked onto me, feeding off my panic. "Those who enter here never escape," another whispered, its breath chilling my skin. I could feel Jenny shaking beside me, her presence grounding me amid the rising tide of fear. I stepped slightly in front of her, an instinctual urge to protect, even in the face of overwhelming dread. "We're not going to be your prisoners," I yelled, trying to summon every ounce of courage left inside me. With that defiance, the shadows rippled, recoiling, festering in anger. I tightened my grip on the dagger, the weapon glowing faintly once again. The courage began to kindle within me, igniting a spark of rebellion against the oppressive feelings of despair. "Together," I called out, locking my gaze with Jenny's once more. As the shadows gathered their strength for the final assault, something remarkable happened. The dagger flared brightly, casting a radiant glow that illuminated the cavern, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The warmth overtook us, invigorating my spirit as I realized the power we had yet to fully harness. With a fierce battle cry, Jenny joined me, and we drove the dagger into the ground, forcing energy through it in a desperate act of unity, determination radiating between us. The cavern erupted with blinding light, every scream merging into a chorus of anguish and rage as the creatures recoiled, the power of our combined will forcing them back. "What's happening?" Jenny screamed as the shockwaves threatened to knock us both down. "We're fighting," I shouted, the energy surging like a tidal wave, chasing away the darkness that had threatened to consume us. Yet as the shadows fled, I knew the battle wasn't over. Their angry cries echoed, promising retribution, while the cavern shuddered dangerously around us. "Keep going," I encouraged, determined to break from this nightmare, no matter what it took. What other horrors lay waiting on the other side of this fight? The cavern shook, the walls reverberating as if acknowledging our stand against the darkness. I could feel the ground tremble beneath my feet as the light from the dagger surged like a beacon, casting long shadows that flickered wildly along the stone walls. My heart thundered in my chest, and I felt an overwhelming instinct to keep pressing on, to drive the darkness away, even if only for a moment. What if we can't hold it back? Jenny's voice quivered, echoing my fears. But I couldn't let doubt seep in. "We have to believe we can," I shouted, my voice raw and fierce. With renewed determination, I focused on the light, urging it to grow stronger. The shadows writhed in anger, their shapes darting back and forth like furious serpents. I could almost see their eyes glimmering, filled with rage and a hunger for vengeance. The air thickened with tension, swirling around us, wrapping like vines as if trying to pull us into its depths. "This isn't over," one shadow hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "You will pay for this. You will regret defying us." A powerful gust of wind swept through the cavern, slamming into us like a battering ram. I struggled to maintain my footing, bracing against the force. Behind us, the brief flicker of light we'd fought for began to fade. "No, no!" I screamed, my hands gripping the dagger tighter, trying to pour every ounce of strength into the fight. But in an instant, the glow diminished, and darkness surged toward us like a flood. I could see the shadowy figures solidifying once more, taking on gruesome, twisted forms that seemed to reach out with sharp claws. My pulse raced as panic threatened to overwhelm me. "Run!" I cried, pulling Jenny along as I dashed deeper into the cavern, not looking back. The shadows were closing in, their guttural growls blending with the sound of my racing heartbeat. The passageway tightened around us, forcing us forward, but the walls felt alive, shifting as if deliberately trying to trap us. Every step echoed with a haunting urgency, matching the frantic pace of my thoughts. Suddenly, the ground beneath us began to crack, fissures snaking across the floor, releasing plumes of smoke that surrounded us. I could see dark figures rise from the depths, wispy forms that slithered up through the gaps, grasping at my legs with intangible fingers, as if trying to drag me into the abyss below. "Don't stop," Jenny urged, but I could feel the weight of despair pressing against me, testing my resolve. I fought against the emotions trying to drag me down, focusing on the dark figures and the swirling shadows pressing in on us. As we approached another opening, a mist swirled up like tendrils of smoke, blocking our path. I squinted against the thick, suffocating fog, trying to see through it. And then, emerging from the haze, I caught sight of something that sent ice coursing through my veins. A massive figure stood before us, towering, with glowing red eyes piercing through the darkness. The air crackled with malicious energy, and I could feel every instinct. Screaming to run, but my feet felt anchored to the ground. The creature loomed closer, its breath hot and fetid. "You thought you could escape?" It thundered, voice booming like an underground explosion. "You are bound to this place now." Jenny tugged at my arm. "We can't let it take us." I forced myself to move again, adrenaline pumping as we slipped past the beast, navigating through the thick fog that hung in the air like a heavy shroud. Just as I thought we'd escaped, I heard a guttural laugh echo behind us, chilling my spine and threatening to steal my resolve. The shadows surged toward us, lunging forward like hellhounds, and the ground shook violently beneath our feet, opening new chasms that seemed hungry for our very essence. "Keep running," I shouted, desperate to break free from this nightmare. We barreled down another tunnel, the air growing colder with each step. The only sounds were our panicked breaths and the echoes of the chaos behind us. But it was the whispers that haunted me, their slithering words wrapping around my mind, urging me to surrender to the darkness. But we couldn't give in. We wouldn't. Finally, we stumbled into yet another chamber, this one filled with an eerie, sickly glow emanating from a pool of shimmering liquid at the center. The surface looked like dark glass, reflecting our terrified faces. "What is this place?" I murmured, dread creeping in as I stepped closer. Jenny hesitated by my side, her eyes wide with apprehension. "I don't know, but it doesn't feel right." Suddenly, a figure rose from the depths, its silhouette distorted by the shimmering liquid. My heart dropped as I recognized the face, one of the lost souls from the previous chamber. It was as if they were reaching out to us, voice barely a whisper. "Help us." Horrified, I took a step back. "We can't. They'll trap us too." The figure transformed into another shadow, its anguished scream echoing through the space. I turned to flee, but more shadows formed around us, their fingers stretching from every corner, closing us in. "No escape," they chanted in unison, the rhythmic torment echoing through the chamber. With every word, the liquid in the pool bubbled violently, sending waves crashing against the edges, threatening to spill over. In that moment, hope seemed to slip away. Yet somewhere deep within, I felt a glimmer of defiance reignite. "We won't become a part of this," I yelled, rallying the last shreds of courage. With a fierce determination, I grasped Jenny's hand. "We have to fight." Together, we rushed toward the pool, feeling the shadows clawing at our backs, desperate to hold us back. "Focus on the light," I urged, the dagger pulsing with energy. It felt as though the dark energy in the air recognized our unity. As we drew closer to the bubbling liquid, we plunged the dagger into the surface. An explosion of light erupted, blinding me momentarily. The darkness recoiled as the liquid boiled over, spilling onto the ground and hissing like steam, the faces of the damned fading into the chaos. But the shadows were not done yet. They surged forward in a final attempt to reclaim us, the chamber trembling beneath our feet. "Let's go," I shouted, pulling Jenny along, the glowing light guiding our escape as we raced toward the flickering remnants of safety. As we sprinted through the cavern, I could feel the relentless grip of the shadows behind us, clawing for purchase, desperate to pull us back into their grasp. The dagger's glow illuminated the way ahead, but I knew the darkness wasn't just going to let us go that easily. It followed us, swirling in the corners of my vision, whispering promises of surrender and despair. "Keep moving," I shouted to Jenny, her face pale as she fought to keep up. The sound of my own voice felt almost foreign in this wretched place, but it was the lifeline we needed. We burst into another expansive chamber, the air thick with a rancid smell, wet earth mingling with something metallic, like copper. A shudder ran through me as I took in the sight before us. The floor was littered with twisted roots that wriggled and jerked as if they had a mind of their own. Shadows hung low, merging with the gnarled growths, making them look alive, as if they were ready to ensnare us. "What are those things?" Jenny stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but I don't want to find out," I replied, heart hammering in my chest as I helped her step carefully through the jagged maze of roots. Just then, a low growl echoed through the chamber, radiating from seemingly all directions. It felt like the very walls were vibrating, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Glancing around, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows. At first, it was subtle, a flicker just beyond the edge of the light. But as I squinted, trying to comprehend what I saw, the figure emerged, a grotesque creature, its body a twisted amalgamation of limbs and shadow. It stood at least 8 feet tall, with elongated fingers that tapered into wickedly sharp claws. Its face was a grotesque mask of agony, molded features twisted into an expression of eternal suffering, eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. "Run!" I screamed, shoving Jenny forward as the creature lunged at us, a monstrous predator ready to pounce. We sprinted deeper into the chamber, the roots thrashing and twisting as if trying to ensnare us. I could hear the claws scraping against the stone floor, echoing like a death knell. Jenny and I dodged around tangles of roots, desperately looking for an exit as the creature's growls turned into frenzied howls. The sound slashed through the air, filling me with terror. "Over there!" I shouted, pointing to a jagged opening in the wall that emitted a faint, eerie light. Breathless, we bolted toward it, our footsteps echoing louder and louder, almost drowning out the growls behind us. The creature was gaining ground, every bone in my body urging me to run faster. As I reached the opening, my hands grazed the rough stones, and I felt the rush of stale air mixed with something sweetly rotten. I hesitated for just a heartbeat, doubt creeping in, but the sound of the creature's howl snapped me back to reality. "No time! Jump!" I yelled, and without a second thought, leaped through the narrow gap, pulling Jenny along behind me. We landed hard on the other side, rolling onto a damp floor as we scrambled to our feet. The chamber was smaller, suffocated by shadows, but at least it was momentarily quiet. I glanced back, praying the creature had not followed. The howls faded, but I could still sense its presence lurking nearby. As I straightened, I noticed faint etched symbols along the walls, twisted runes that flickered with a ghostly light, almost like they were alive. "What do you think this place is?" Jenny asked, eyes wide, trembling slightly. "I don't know, but those symbols feel like they're watching us," I replied, feeling an unsettling weight pressing on my shoulders. Before I could say more, the ground beneath us began to tremble once again, and the walls closed in as if the chamber was alive, eager to consume us. The light from the runes flickered with urgency, which sent chilling realizations running through me. The shadows weren't merely waiting. They were gathering strength, preparing for something far worse. "Let's find another way out," I urged, taking Jenny's hand as we creeped along the walls, scanning for any clues or paths. With every step, dread welled up within me. Was there really a way out? Or would we be trapped forever? Then, from the depths of the shadows, I heard a slow, deliberate breathing, each exhale heavy with malice. The sound grew louder, echoing off the walls, until I could feel it vibrating through the ground. I froze, heart pounding, and turned slowly to face the void behind us. Emerging from the darkness was another figure, much larger than the last. Its form was a grotesque silhouette, bulging and twisted, with grotesque, protruding bones that glimmered with a damp sheen. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, limbs bending at odd angles, as it stepped into the light, revealing a maw full of jagged teeth that stretched impossibly wide. "This is your end," it rasped, voice slithering like a serpent through the air. Despair almost knocked me to my knees. My instinct screamed at me to flee, but panic threatened to paralyze me. Yet somehow, I clung to the hope that the dagger could save us once more. "We need to fight," I shouted, lifting the dagger as a makeshift weapon. Just then, the creature lunged, and I braced for impact. But before it could reach us, the symbols on the walls glowed brighter, pulsating with an ancient energy, sending a shockwave through the air. The creature screeched, recoiling as if struck by something unseeable. The air shimmered, and I sensed a flicker of opportunity. "Now, Jenny!" I cried, surging forward, my heart racing as I launched myself at the beast, the dagger raised high. In a blinding flash of light, I brought it down with all my might. The blade plunged into the creature's flesh, and the moment the steel connected, an explosion of energy erupted. The chamber lit up like a starburst, shadows shrieking and twisting as the beast let out a deafening howl that echoed off the walls. The ground shook violently, and I felt the weight of the shadows pulling back, retreating in chaos. "Keep going," I urged Jenny, adrenaline coursing through me as I yanked the blade free and sprinted toward a new tunnel that lay uncovered amidst the chaos. Together, we bolted out of the chamber, breathing hard, the sounds of the creature's rage echoing behind us. But the pull of the dagger's light was stronger now, guiding us into an uncharted path. Yet, even as we fled, I couldn't shake the unnerving sensation that something far worse awaited us at the end of this dark tunnel. What lay beyond that next corner, waiting to test our resolve? The thought sent a shiver through my spine, dread creeping back in. As we raced down the dark tunnel, the air seemed to thicken, becoming almost suffocating. I glanced back, half expecting to see the creature looming behind us, its eyes glowing with that terrifying malevolence. But the corridor was empty, the darkness closing in behind us like a hungry mouth ready to swallow everything whole. The flickering light from the dagger illuminated the way ahead, but shadows danced on the walls, twisting in unsettling ways. Every time I thought I caught sight of something moving out of the corner of my eye, I felt my heart leap with terror. "Are you okay?" Jenny's voice shook as she stumbled slightly, catching herself against the rough wall. "Yeah, just keep moving," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Deeper we plunged into the tunnel, each step echoing in the eerie silence. The walls were damp and slick, and I could feel a cold creeping through my bones. It was like stepping into the belly of some great beast, the sense of foreboding thickening with every passing moment. Then, just when I thought we couldn't go any further, we reached an open space that widened into a cavernous hall, the ceiling lost in shadows above. But something was different here. The air felt charged, vibrating with a low hum that sent chills coursing through me. In the center of the hall was a massive stone altar, covered with strange markings that glowed faintly, casting an eerie light across the chamber. "What do you think it is?" Jenny asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but it feels wrong," I replied, instinctively stepping back, my pulse racing with a primal fear. Before I could turn to leave, The shadows stirred around the edges of the hall, slowly coalescing, forming into shapes that moved with a sinister purpose. They whispered to one another in hushed tones, their voices slithering through the air like poisoned darts, laced with promises and old sorrows. Suddenly, the altar glowed brighter, and the markings writhed with energy, creating a cacophony of sound that made my head spin. I felt an oppressive weight settle on my chest, making it hard to breathe. "What's happening?" Jenny cried out, panic rising in her voice. "I don't know. We need to get out of here," I yelled, my eyes darting around the cavern, searching for any escape route that would take us away from this nightmare. As I turned to flee, the shadows struck, their forms darting from the edges of the hall and wrapping around my ankles like menacing vines. I stumbled trying to shake them off, but the grip was far too strong. "Help! I can't," I gasped as more shadows surged toward me, their whispers becoming agonizing shrieks that filled my mind with despair. "Stay close," Jenny shouted, rushing back to me, but the shadows clawed at her too, pulling her towards the altar. "No," she cried, desperation etching into her features. With all the strength I had left, I managed to reach out and grab her hand, feeling the rough texture of her skin slipping against mine as we tried to pull each other free. But the shadows were relentless. They tightened their hold, dragging us toward the glowing altar, which pulsed ominously as if it were alive. "This can't be happening," I yelled, fear consuming me as I struggled against the darkness. With every ounce of strength, I thrust the dagger into the ground, the blade catching the light as I willed the energy to flow through it. In that moment, the air shifted, and beams of light erupted from the dagger, piercing the shadows and forcing them back, screeching as if they were being scalded. "Keep pushing," I shouted to Jenny, feeling my resolve hardening into something sharper than steel. As the light spread, the shadows hissed like steam, swirling away in frantic arcs, giving us the momentary freedom we needed. We stumbled back, pulling ourselves free from the entangling darkness, our hands still clasped like lifelines. But the altar was still pulsating, its power undiminished. And then, from deep within the stone, a figure began to arise, black and contoured in shadows, yet distinctly human in shape. My stomach dropped as I recognized the features manifesting. It was a face twisted in torment, a reflection of everything we had faced so far, yet it lingered with a deeper sorrow. "Join us," it rasped, voice echoing ominously through the cavern. "You cannot escape your fate. You belong to the shadows now." "No!" I shouted, stepping back, my heart racing. "We have to fight it," Jenny urged, eyes wide with terror. The figure raised an arm, beckoning, and suddenly I felt tendrils of darkness seeping into my mind, whispering, nagging voices that clamored for attention, filling my head with despair and doubt. I struggled to resist, trying to focus on the dagger, still pulsing with light in my grip. "We won't let you take us," I yelled, pouring every ounce of willpower into the blade. The chamber enveloped us in darkness, but the light from the dagger sparked anew, illuminating the figure with blinding brilliance. Screams filled the room as the figure writhed in the light, its shape flickering between shadow and substance, lost between two worlds. "Do not listen to it," Jenny's voice cut through the chaotic din. "It's trying to break us." With a final surge of power, I raised the dagger once more, channeling every shred of courage inside me. "We're stronger than you think," I bellowed, plunging it into the ground again, sending waves of light crashing through the cavern walls, shattering the darkness. But the figure fought back, dark energy swirling around it like a storm. It roared with fury, its voice echoing like crystal glass shattering, and I felt the ground quake beneath me. "Together!" I yelled, locking eyes with Jenny, urging her to join me in the fight. We raised the dagger high, the light intensifying as our hands met on the hilt. The air around us shimmered, and the altar erupted in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves of radiant energy across the chamber. In that moment, the figure screamed, the shadows cried out in rage, and the light engulfed us both, spiraling us into an abyss. The light swallowed us, pulling me into a dizzying void, a whirlwind of colors and sensations that felt like they were ripping apart my very being. I wasn't sure if I was falling or floating. Everything blurred together in a surreal haze. But amid the chaos, I felt Jenny's hand tightly gripping mine. "Don't let go," I yelled, my voice barely breaking through the cacophony around us. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the whirlwind stopped. I landed hard on a cold, stone floor, gasping for breath. As I looked around, I realized we were in a dimly lit room, the air heavy with a palpable darkness that wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. The dagger lay just in front of me, its blade flickering faintly, the only source of light in this claustrophobic space. I could feel a chill creeping up my spine as shadows moved in the corners, whispering softly, a chorus of voices intertwining into a symphony of despair. "Where are we?" Jenny asked. Her voice trembled, edged with fear. "It doesn't feel right," I murmured, feeling a deep sense of foreboding. Just then, the echoes of that monstrous figure from earlier slithered back into my mind, its presence lingering, like a bad dream refusing to fade. I shuddered at the memory of its twisted smile, the way it had beckoned us toward the altar. Was this just another trap? Suddenly, the shadows danced closer, and I could make out faces, contorted and pained, wailing silently from within the darkness, their eyes filled with anguish. They reached out with ghostly hands, clawing at the space between us, as if trying to pull themselves free from the void. This place is a prison. I realized, a chill racing down my spine as panic gripped me. "We have to get out, Jenny, now." I snatched the dagger from the ground, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. With each step, the shadows hissed and reared back, their whispers lifting in an angry crescendo. "Leave now, while you still can," they shrieked, voices overlapping in a cacophony that rattled my bones. Ignoring their pleas, I pushed deeper into the darkness, determined to find an escape, but the floor beneath me began to tremble, shaking violently. The shadows writhed, shifting as if awakening from a slumber, and suddenly, they lunged at me, a tidal wave of despair and fury. I raised the dagger, shining its light against the encroaching darkness. The beam pierced through the shadows, and I felt a moment of triumph as they recoiled like a beast pinched by a flame. But it was only for a moment. Their howls crescendoed, filling the room with a deep, resonant roar. "Your light can't save you," a deep voice boomed from the shadows, and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. "No, we won't fall," I shouted back, feeling the desperation clawing at the edges of my sanity. Together, I squared my shoulders, glancing at Jenny. "We face this together, remember?" With renewed determination, I rallied my strength, pushing the dagger forward, illuminating the room in bright, blistering light. The shadows screamed in agony, contorting, slipping back just enough to allow a narrow path to emerge from the darkness. "Run!" I shouted, pulling Jenny forward, adrenaline fueling my every move as we dashed toward the exit. Just as we reached the threshold, a cold hand shot out from the shadows, gripping my leg with a force that felt like ice. I stumbled, falling to the ground as fingers clawed at my flesh, dragging me back. "Jenny, help!" I cried, panic flooding my veins, the shadows threatening to pull me into their abyss. In a split second, I felt Jenny's hand in my own, the warmth of her grasp breaking through the terror. "I won't leave you," she screamed, pulling with all her strength. With a surge of energy, we stumbled together through the archway, and I felt the suffocating grip of the shadows loosen just enough for us to break free. We tumbled out into the world beyond, gasping for air as the light enveloped us, the cold darkness falling away like a bad dream. I could still hear the haunting whispers of the shadows, echoing behind us as we stood on the edge of the abyss. "Is it over?" Jenny breathed, her eyes wide, scanning the darkness that still lingered in the distance. "I think so," I replied, but doubt gnawed at me, threading through my mind like a spider's web. The shadows wouldn't give up easily. They would always haunt us, waiting for a moment of weakness, lurking in the corners of our minds. But we survived this. Even as I turned away from the darkness, I knew the fear would linger within me. Another layer of scars etched into my soul, a constant reminder of what lay just beyond the light. As we walked away, I cast one last glance into the shadows, half expecting to see their faces watching, tethered by despair. And in that moment, I understood it was a battle I might never fully win, but I would keep fighting, clutching the light that guided me back even through the darkest of times. The shadows may be my past, but they would never be my future.